Good afternoon. I'd like to call the session of the Board of Revision to order, and by acknowledging that we are on Treaty 1 territory, the home and traditional lands of the Anishinaabe, Ojibwe, Skinner Cree, and Dakota peoples, and the national homeland of the Red River Nation. Our treaty water comes from Shoal Lake, 41st Nation, and Treaty 3 territory. With me today are Robert Hutchings and Diane Knight. My name is Harvey Diamond. The Assessment Department is being represented by Jonathan Spacek, and our administrative assistant is Jaswinder Kumar. We'll be hearing applications for revision of the assessment rules in accordance with the Municipal Assessment Act. The matters for which revision are requested have been described in each application, and we will limit discussion to those matters. The statements that are made at this hearing must be sworn testimony, and anyone speaking to a matter must be first sworn in. Be advised that comparative assessments of properties are not considered as evidence of market value by the Board of Revision. The Board of Revision is appointed annually by Council and is independent of it and the City Administration. It makes its decisions on the basis of the evidence provided at this hearing and will issue a written order that will be mailed to all parties as soon as possible. Please note that the Board's decision with respect to an application may be appealed to the Manitoba Municipal Board if the matter pertains to assessed value or classification, or to the Court of King's Bench if the matter pertains to an application for exemption from taxation. Should a party wish to appeal, information on do so will be included with the Board's order. With respect to the hearing process, so confirm the points of appeal with your property to be addressed to each applicant following the swearing in. We'll then have the assessor's testimony followed by questions that the applicant may have, and then the applicant's testimony followed by questions. Each side will be given an opportunity to summarize if they wish to do so. Once all the evidence about an application has been brought forward, the applicant may leave. The votes will repeat for each item on the docket today, and the session will close after all the applications have been heard, and the Board will deliberate in private and render its decisions. You will receive the Board's decision or email as soon as possible. As information, all public hearings are live streamed, recorded, and will form part of a public record. And today we'll be hearing the items 2 through 8. And Mr. Kumar, you can swear in the parties.
Yes, Mr. Thank you. Thank you. Mr. Assessor, please state your full name.
My full name is Jonathan Spacek.
Thank you. Do you affirm that the evidence you are about to give at this hearing is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Do you affirm that the evidence you are about to give at this hearing is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? Thank you.
We're ready to proceed with 111 Lombard, but my computer's not picking it up yet. It's wait a minute, so I might need a second. Oh, there we go. Okay, anytime you're ready, Mr. Spacek.
All right, thank you, everyone. All right, Mr. Chair. We are looking at roll number 1306068500, address 111 Lombard, and we're at a 2023 assessment with a reference date of April 1st, 2021 of $25,909,000. We have a office building that is located just off of Waterfront Drive. It's 3. If you look at my page 2, you can see exactly where it's located on the north side of Lombard. The original building was built in 1903, and we have after complete renovation in 2013 and new construction on the infill portion of the building, we have a gross floor area of 154,000 square feet with a leasable area of 124,012 square feet. And if you turn and look to my page 3, you can see the original frame of the building, and then at the top picture on page 3, you can see the center portion of the building where they included, where in 2013, the whole building was renovated, infill portion was built. They added a construction of 3 new stairwells, elevators, and washrooms into that infill location. And then some exterior work was completed as well. And they also gutted the whole building and renovated it as well. So Again, after all this is said and done, we have an effective date of 2005 on this building. So original built 1903, renovations in 2013 with the new construction, and that gives it the effective year of 2005. And at the end of my presentation, I've included some interior pictures as well, so you can see the quality of the build. And the actual valuation is pretty straightforward. If you turn to my page 5, we have 124,012 square feet of leasable space. We have this is using our OFC parameters. We have a vacancy loss of 12%, expenses of 3%, and I'll just go back up to the top. I skipped it, but the average rent per square foot in this building is $17.68. And going back down to the center, we have expenses of 3% this cycle. That is up from 2% in 2020. And we have a shortfall for OFCs of $10 a square foot. And then our overall capitalization rate for a 2003 or 2005 effective date with this size for an OFC is 6.65%. If we turn to my page 7, you will see our capitalization rate sheet. We have a capitalization rate on this property of 6.65%, and you'll notice in the second row down, you have downtown B, OFB. So for all of our OFB properties, which in my mind this is very similar to, with the large square footage, recently built elevators, close to Portage in Maine, we have a 6.75% to 6.75%. So that's just saying that all OFBs are 6.75%, and our current classification of this building is an OFC. So you'll see that we're at a 6.65%, which is very close to that 6.75%. And if we turn down to page 9, and for anybody that hasn't had an OFB with the office section yet, you'll notice we've included a little different than our standard, list off a bunch of OFB comparables. When we created the 2023 assessment, or while we were creating our section did
Please speak at your mic. We're having difficulty hearing you.
Oh, sorry. Let me just double check. Can you hear me now? I'm not sure why you're.
He didn't know sometimes, so just.
Yeah, sorry, that hasn't happened here at the office before. So if you notice me cutting out, just let me know and I'll rephrase. Hopefully it doesn't continue.
Okay, thank you. We're hearing you good now.
Yeah, okay. I'll just hopefully it doesn't happen. So when we were creating the 2023 assessment, we did an OFB marketplace study overview and there's also an OFA one done as well. As there's quite a bit of information out there on these properties in the city, and you'll see what was done was a 6-year stabilized analysis. So again, if you zoom in a little bit on it, there is a lot of information on these pages, but the main information at the top is kind of an overview just to give you give you a view of what we found, and then now we're using this as evidence when presenting for the rents of the property and for vacancy rates and for shortfall. So that's some of the information that is widely available. But if you look at the top right of the OFB marketplace study, or at the top of it, you'll see the first row is the average, and all these are broken down by the 6 years being looked at. So we looked at 2015, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20. And then the last row, or the last column, I should say, the second last column is the stabilized from 2018 to 20. So all these net leases were stabilized.
Again, you're fading now.
Yeah, I'll wait a sec. Again, this hasn't happened here at the office, so I do apologize.
It's good again now. Okay.
Yeah. I'll just slow it down. All right, so I was just saying that if you look at the right side, the stabilized column, the second column from the right, is stabilized 18 to 20s. So you will see the stabilized average is $14.35. This is across all net leases, as all the net leases that were analyzed in the OFB market. And you'll see the weighted average was $14.39, and the median was $14 a square foot. And there was a range of net leases from $10 to $19 a square foot. Under that is our 3 rows of vacancy information. So across all OFBs in the city that had net leases in place, and we could analyze the vacancy on those properties. The vacancy average was 13.6%. The vacancy weighted average was 12%, and the vacancy median was 8.7%. And if you look under that, we have the number of CRUs leased. So this is the commercial rental units leased. So if a square footage of 1,500 square feet or a square footage of 10,000 square feet was leased out, these were included in that analysis. And you can see per year how many were looked at. So in 2018, there were 60 looked at. In 2019, there were 88 looked at. And in 2020, there were 69 looked at. This gives us a total amount of leases looked at, or leasable space looked at, of different units of 217 over those 3 years. So that adds up to 1,064,000 square feet looked at. And under that is our shortfall. So for our OFB marketplace study, we have a shortfall average of $14.05 from 18 to 20, from 2018 to 2020. And then the shortfall weighted average is $13.88, and the shortfall median came to $13.60. And under that, the non-recoverables were looked at across the OFBs, and we have a non-recoverable average stabilized at 3.6%, a non-recoverable weighted average at 3%, and a non-recoverable median at 0.9%. So again, for a better visual view of this, just underneath, we have a classic standard deviation bell curve to show that. In the green portion of it, this is where the first standard deviation, where 68% of the net leases found are within this green range of $12.75 on the low end up to $16 on the high end. So that's 144 of the units looked at. And then once you go outside of those, you can see the larger range of rents that have less of the units, but it increases the range. So in the low end of the range, the lowest rent found in OFB was a $10 net rent, and then the highest rent found was a $19 net rent. And you can see that's just what that curve is showing. And at the bottom of the first page, underneath the standard deviation curve, you can see that some of the OFB outside sources were looked at as well to see were our findings, do they make sense, and were they within range of some other market analysis. So you can see Cushman and Wakefield, their weighted average stabilized for rental rates from 2018 to 2020 was $15.57. Their vacancy was reported at 10.2%. And underneath, we have some of the Johnson report information. And you can see the average Johnson was reporting in his report was $15.31 for the average rent, $15.37 for the weighted average, $15 for the median. The range was $12.50 to $17.50. And underneath the vacancy, again, the average 13%, vacancy weighted average 13%, vacancy median 7%, and vacancy unadjusted, including owner-occupied buildings, 7%. Underneath that, finally, the shortfall average was $14.75 in OFBs. Shortfall weightage average founded by Johnson was $14.59, and the shortfall median was $14.76. And again, if you scroll down through the rest of the information, we've just included some of those properties that were looked at. And in finer detail, I won't go through them, but each one has the 6-year, what the averages rental rates were found, what vacancy was found, how many CRUs were leased in that building at the time, the average size of them, and then the shortfall for that property and the non-recoverable. So again, none of these properties are being looked at today, but they're just some of the OFBs that were looked at when we did this analysis. And if you scroll down to my page 13, which is page 5 of the OFB report, you'll just notice there's all the OFB, the Johnson report data that was provided in the Johnson report. So you can see the different average shortfalls, you can see the different actual CAM and tax recoveries that are in place, different vacancy rates, and how much of the space is occupied versus the rental space, giving you the total vacancy rates. And so again, I tried to go through that in a little detail, as we do have a few OFBs today, so you will see what those rental ranges are. But again, this property, again, being completely renovated in 2013 and having some strong tenants in place, we have an average rental rate of $17.68 for this property based on our model. And if you scroll down to page 15 of my brief, I just also included the 2020 income and expense mailer. You can see that the rental income reported was $2.3 million. They had a small storage rate on the left side of the mailer of $29,000, and they've also included recoveries. They received recoveries from some of the tenants, utilities maintenance recoveries of $487,000, property tax recoveries of $380,000, for a total income of $3,236,000. And again, they've included their expenses, totaling $1,398,000, And when removing that from the total income, you get a net operating income for this property reported of $1,838,000. Again, that's what's being reported, and our model is giving this property a net operating income of $1,722,000. So again, under but within range. Total leasable area 124,000 with the 0% vacant space in the building. It's fully occupied with the 7 total tenants. And page 17 of my brief just shows the tenant verification form. You can see the leases in place. They are almost all gross or semi-gross leases. And page 19, I'll go through this once as well, a little more in depth, and then after, I'll just point out if anything is obvious with it. But we've included in 2023 a COVID questionnaire. So this is page 19 of my brief. And you'll see, number 1, please indicate the extent to which COVID-19 pandemic and related public health measures have impacted the operation of this property. You'll notice moderately impact was checked, and it has the option of has not impacted, minor impact, moderate impact, or significant impact. And number 2, were tenants at this location closed temporarily due to public health measures? They put yes. Question 3, have any of the existing tenants closed permanently as a direct result of COVID-19? And that is no. In 2020, has the property experienced an increase in operating expenses in response to COVID-19? The answer is no. Question 5, did the property incur non-recoverable capital expenses related to health and safety precautions taken in response to COVID-19? No. 6, have existing tenants requested rent deferral or rent abatements resulting from COVID-19? No. And on the next page, page 20 of my brief, we have question 7. This is between January 1, 2020 and April 1st, 2021, where new leases negotiated after effects of COVID-19 became apparent? No. Question 8, have any of the existing leases been amended as a result of COVID-19? No. Question 9, have any tenants abandoned or breached the terms of their leases as a direct result of COVID-19? The answer is no. And question 10, has the property received any government funded assistance, grants, or financial support associated with COVID-19? And the answer is no. So I believe that is my presentation, and if we have any questions, please let me know. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Mr. Newman, any questions?
Yes. And let me just say to the panel, we have a docket of office buildings today, all in the greater downtown area. And so I'm going to ask a series of questions. I'll call them foundational questions that I think will have application generally to the properties we're going to hear. And so then I'll ask that some of this evidence be applied more generally throughout. So, Mr. Spacek, you took us to page 9 of your brief, and you made reference to the fact that there's a study done on OFB buildings. But the docket today deals with Bs, Cs, Ds, and as well an OFS, correct?
Correct, Mark.
So what I'd like to try and understand is what's the difference between a D and a C?
Sorry, what's the difference between a Class D building and a Class C building?
Class C and Class D.
Again, generally how you classified a building, size, age, location, some of the common characteristics in the building can be looked at. How many floors are in there? What amenities does it have? Does it have an elevator? They're just, some of the basic things I look at. What is the quality of finish in the space, location, which I already said. So just, then I will look at a property and, the best I can determine which class it would fit under our model.
Okay. And so those points of differentiation, will they similarly apply to differentiate a B from a C?
Yeah, there are, again, I think you'll find this is a case where You'll try to argue it's a C, I'll try to argue it's a B, but characteristically and what parameters come out really at the end of the day determine what the value is with our income approach. So whether it's a B and it gets a 6.75% cap, or we have it as a C and it gets with its qualification or its size and its age and its finish, it's getting a 6.65. So in this case, right, it's really subject to our opinion on it.
In your mind, there's not a lot of difference between a 6.65 and a 6.75, I gather.
Yeah, I just in general, from what I look at buildings, it's pretty close. It's we're not really usually arguing that small of a difference.
Okay, so let me ask you this. Let's go to page 5 of your brief.
Yeah.
This is the valuation, and it's all model rent. It's all model driven, correct?
Absolutely, yes.
And the rents similarly are extracted from the model.
They are.
So I noticed, for example, that the model would say that a space of 4,608 square feet should have a rent of $20.01.
You're reading the rent for that size of space, yes?
Yes.
And sorry, I missed the question.
So the model says that a 4,608 square foot space should get a rent of $20.01.
That is what is in this case, yes. This property with this characteristics for that space is what we're getting.
And then an 8,500 square foot space immediately above it should get a rent of $19.18.
That is what this is showing, yes.
And then a 2,892 square foot space should get a rent of $20.67. That's what the model said.
Yes.
Okay. Now let's go to your page 9. And I think you've explained to us that page 9 is an overview of the study as a whole.
Absolutely.
And you pointed us in the top half of page 9 to the right-hand column, which is called the stabilized column. And that tells us that the average rent is $14.35 per square foot, correct?
Absolutely.
And the weighted average is $14.39, and the median is $14.
Agree with you, yes.
And it tells us there's the maximum is $19 and the minimum is 10.
Yes.
All right. Now, can we just look at the buildings that make up this sample for a moment? Page 10.
Some of them, yes.
So 330 St. Mary's Avenue, that's at the corner of St. Mary's and Hargrave, correct?
Correct.
And that's across the street from the Delta Hotel. That building is connected to the interior walkway system, correct?
Agreed, yes.
And it's got underground parking, correct?
Correct, Mark.
240 Graham, similarly, underground parking connected to the walkway system.
Correct, Mark.
220 Portage, that's the Royal Bank building on Portage and Fort, underground parking connected to the walkway system.
Yes.
161 Portage, so to be clear, 161 Portage, we've got the Fairmont Hotel, and then there's a building to the east of it, a 4 or 5 story building. That's 165 Portage, correct?
That sounds correct, Mark.
161 Portage, excuse me. And the 3-year average rent on 161 Portage is $13.94, correct?
Agreed, Mark.
But again, that property has access to the walkway system and it has underground parking.
Mark, I agree with you.
And you'd agree with me that of the various properties that are on this list, the one at 161 Portage is the closest locationally to the subject property.
Yeah, I would agree distance-wise.
Yes, distance-wise.
Yeah.
Yeah. And all the buildings on this list, on page 10, page 11, page 12, these are all in the city's system classified as OFB buildings, correct?
Correct. I agree with you.
And I don't want to belabor this, but would you agree with me that with the exception perhaps of 1661 Portage, which is at Portage and Route 90, all of the buildings are in what I'm going to call the downtown business core.
Yeah, your range of business, where does it end? Right at Portage in Maine, where the Richardson building is for our subject property, you're saying?
Well, I'm asking more generally whether they're all located. Let's go Portage in Maine on the east, and let's go Memorial Boulevard on the west, and let's go Portage to Broadway on the north-south. They're all located in that core, aren't they?
Yes, absolutely.
All right. And as we've discussed, they're all classified as OFB.
Yes.
And there's not a single rent on this list at $20 a square foot, is there?
There is not one being shown, no.
No. And of course, the subject is classified in the city system as an OFC, correct?
In our system, we have it as an OFC, yes.
All right. Now, let's go to let's come back to page 5. So at the end of the day, as you told us, the gross potential income is $2,192,000, and that's $17.68 a square foot.
Yes, that is true.
All right. And then in terms of the capitalization rates, so page 7, as you pointed out to us, the downtown B buildings, 20th and 80th percentile, are both 6.75%, correct?
Correct, Mark.
And again, based on the sample that starts at page 9 and continues through page 13 of your brief, certainly the great majority of the OFB buildings, as we discussed earlier, are between Portage and Broadway and between Memorial and Main Street, correct?
Yes, you're in your downtown core range again.
And so the subject does not have access to the walkway system, correct?
Yeah, the closest access our subject has is a 200-meter walk to the Richardson building. That's where you would enter the underground.
Okay. And the subject does not have underground parking?
No, it has, again, surface parking options and parkade options around.
And the subject rents are not listed on the study between pages 9 and 13, correct?
Oh, they are gross and semi-gross leases.
All right. So then just a couple of other things. The shortfall, again, top half of page 9, you've indicated that the shortfall average is $14.05, correct?
Yes.
And the weighted is $13.88 and the median is $13.60.
Yes.
And again, we'll come to them as we go to them building by building, but this property, the assigned shortfall is $10.
Yes, that is true.
Okay. And one other thing, again, this study summarizes events, I gather, through 2020. Is that fair?
Yes, yeah, through the end of 2020.
And so the impacts of COVID, as they will be felt in terms of remote workplace and people downsizing offices, I'll suggest to you those are not yet reflected in this analysis. Would you agree?
Yeah, I would agree. If there's any effects after kind of January 1st, 2021, those will be seen in more in the 21 mailers and going forward.
Okay. And similarly, back to page 9, you explained to us that the great majority of the rents, the 68%, are between $12.79 and $15.99.
That is true, yes.
Those are my questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Hutchings, any questions?
Is that for me?
Yes, do you have any questions?
Okay. Yeah, I guess my only question is regarding Mr. Jonathan. The net operating income on the income and expense mailer, page 15. Does that reflect, in your opinion, a accurate net leases?
Their income, like consistently over the years, I had this last cycle, nothing's majorly changing. You know, they seem to report pretty consistently their numbers a similar way, if that makes sense.
Okay. That's my only question. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Knight, do you have any questions?
I do not.
And I don't either. So, Mr. Newman, when you're ready, you can go ahead.
Yes, thank you. So, I think ultimately the most important issue is the rental rate. The assessor's at an average of $17.68 per square foot. I will show you that we are at $14.88 a square foot overall. You've heard the cross-examination on the location of the building. It's at the foot of Lombard at Waterfront Drive. As the assessor notes, it's not connected to the walkway. You've got to go 200 meters to get to the walkway system. The city classifies it as a C, and accordingly it gets a lesser shortfall because the theory is there's less required to maintain the building. I'm going to show you many rents, but I will say to you at the outset, the assessor's own data in his report, the OFB analysis that you've been presented does not support $17.68 a square foot. It does not support the assessor's model rents of $20.01 a square foot, or $20.67 a square foot, or $19.52, or $19.98, or $19.18. That's because there was but a single rent, one single rent at $19. That was the maximum. There's nothing to support any of this analysis. And indeed, the assessor's analysis supports our position, and indeed our position, as you will hear me argue, is quite conservative, because when you go back to page 9 of the assessor's information, the average rent in a B building, and we are not a B building. We don't have the benefit of what all these buildings in this analysis have in terms of being in the downtown core and connection to the walkway system with underground parking. The average rent is $14.35. The weighted average is $14.39, and the median is $14. So how the heck do we get to $17.68, I ask you, rhetorically? And my submission to you is we can't. So again, I'm going to show you rents. As the assessor has noted, all the rents in this building are essentially gross rents. That's the structure of the leases in this building. And I'll come back to speak a little bit more about that. Go to page 4 of my submission. And I'll make one observation that the closest comparable the assessor has got in the OFB list is 161 Cap Portage, which, as we note, has an average rent of $13.94, a 3-year weighted average of $13.88, and a 3-year median of $13.50. Again, a long way from $17.68. So page 4, non-recoverable expense. I have a non-recoverable expense submission. I don't know if you want me to do that separately. That's been the request of many of the panels. I'm quite happy to do it separately and do it once.
And we're happy if you do it once and do it separately.
All right. However,
this is different from previous years, that we have heard you before.
Yes, I understand that. I will mention, however, on page 4 of my brief, And I'm going to show you the structure of some of these leases. They're government leases here. They're not truly net leases. And the provincial lease does not allow recovery of certain expenses. They are listed on page 4. And the federal government lease has limitations based on the Consumer Price Index. And I'll show you the excerpts from the lease that speak to those as well. I want to speak to capitalization rates in a more general sense. So a couple of things happened in the downtown Winnipeg office market over the last number of years. We had significant construction that occurred in downtown Winnipeg with the construction and opening of True North Square. It brought what I anticipate the city considers Class A office space into the market, significant Class A office space, and there was a domino effect as a consequence where tenants were prepared to relocate, tenants moved from Portage and Main, tenants moved to True North Square, tenants moved from other buildings to True North Square, but it puts in play a series of dominoes. And what ends up happening is tenants are able to move up in the marketplace to some extent. And so there's a lot of movement in the office market. And what it does ultimately is it creates a significant vacancy consideration in the various categories of office space. And you're going to hear about all of those today because we have the full spectrum of different types of office buildings on this docket, with the exception of Class A buildings, which are not on this docket. Bottom of page 5, you'll note some, and onto the top of page 6, you'll note some data with respect to office vacancy rates for Class C space being reported ranging from 18.7 to 11.6, and in the central business district at 11.9. There's an article in the lower half of page 6 about the impact there's going to be on the office market and all those difficulties. But then, of course, something else happened. Everything I've just described to you would have happened anyways, but then something else happened, and it's called COVID. And we see it in this room at the moment. Mr. Diamond is in the room. I am in the room. The assessor is somewhere else. 2 panel members are somewhere else. People aren't coming downtown anymore. People aren't going to their offices. There's all sorts of issues around this, and it is going to change the demand for office space. So remote work has changed the world forever. Let's go to the bottom of page 8 of my brief. The impacts of COVID, just as a reminder, so we don't forget where we've been. In March of 2020, a state of emergency was declared onto page 9. Public health orders were made, and we had the yo-yoing impact of public health orders. And through April 1 of 21, we had surges, and then we had things quiet down. We had retail open up to a limited extent. We had the bizarre sight of a Walmart with yellow caution tape wrapping certain of the aisles and shelves because they could only sell items that were essential and they could not sell items that were not essential. So all of this, I suggest to you, creates impacts in the marketplace. It disrupts the marketplace. The downtown office marketplace was already disrupted by the addition of True North Square. That disruption is only increased and amplified by COVID, by the flight to remote work, and the fact that many, many tenants could not pay rent. COVID rent subsidy programs came to be. So go to page 13. How do we distinguish one building from another? And I asked the assessor, as you'll recall, how do we distinguish a B from a C from a D? And the assessor talked about size and age and location and number of floors and amenities and quality of finish. I don't think it's as simple as size, for example. The very last, or one of the last buildings on this docket is 294 Portage, over 100,000 square feet. It's a big building. It's every bit as big as this one. And yet, some will say it's a very different building. So we're going to see that I don't think it can simply be size. Age is a factor, I agree. Location is a significant factor, I will agree. And when you've got buildings in the downtown core connected to the walkway system with the benefit of underground parking, those are significant attributes that allow those buildings to obtain higher rent. You take that away and the buildings are not able to secure rent that is as high. So Altus has done a study, and this is referenced at page 14. They've made reference to the fact, and we'll come back to this as we go through the properties. In the view of Altus, Class B should be at 7%, Class C should be at 7.75, Class D it should be at 8.5, and Heritage should always have a bump depending on the circumstances of a heritage designation. It's important to categorize the buildings properly. And, you know, we saw, for example, and I've reproduced on page 16, the cap rate chart that the assessor has used in the last two cycles. The assessor has used a 6.65% cap rate. In my view, that is too low. That is below the 20th percentile for Class B buildings. It is different than all the buildings that are in the study that the assessor has drawn to our attention. The brokers note a range of 6.5 to 7% for the Class B buildings. The brokers don't even categorize Class C buildings. So ultimately, I conclude 7.25%. I will come back to that. But primarily, it's a number of things. It's location, it's absence of walkway, absence of connection to the underground, absence of underground parking. It doesn't have surrounding it the variety of amenities that you get for buildings in downtown Winnipeg. Where are all the restaurants? Where are all the other services that surround all the downtown office buildings? This one doesn't have it. This one is somewhat of an island. So go to page 18. So you can see at page 18, that was the original calculation of the assessment that I simply made available to you. Then what I've done is I've noted that the actual expenses on this building from the questionnaire total $1,398,000. That calculates to $11.27 per square foot. And so what I have done at page 19, which is where my spreadsheet is found, I have used in the case of all rents that are net, the face rate from which I have subtracted $11.27 a square foot, which is the expenses actually incurred on the building, because again, these are gross leases, and what I'm doing is I'm bringing them down to a net rate. And so looking at that chart, you'll note, for example, that the lease for 68,000 square feet, which is a single tenant, the federal government, I've used a rate of $13.96 a square foot. The assessor uses a rate of $17.57. So $3.60 difference approximately. That's a very large number. And again, the assessor's own comparable data for Class B buildings do not support $17.57. I've used the 12% vacancy. I've used the $10 shortfall. I've used 7% on the non-recoverable. And again, I'll show you in a moment the excerpts from certain of the leases. That brings me to a net operating income of $1,362,000. and I applied to that a 7.25% cap rate. This building is not getting a blended rate of $17.68 per square foot. I told you at the outset of my submission, that would be one of the key issues. It remains one of the key issues. The building simply is not getting $17.68 a square foot. Page 20 was a series of OFC comparables, which this assessor presented at the hearing in relation to 570 Portage, a building by coincidence just outside the core with no connection to the walkway, with no underground parking. I've got some additional items. Page 21, there was a set of comparables for 183 Kennedy, which is on this docket by coincidence. Page 23 was a set of comparables for 275 Portage, classified as an OFB, and in fairness, from the 2020 assessment. And I'll come back to the rent one more time. Page 25, this is an excerpt from the lease with Her Majesty the Queen, the province of Manitoba. And if you look at the bottom of 26, there's the definition of operating costs. And operating costs means expenditures for. And then there's a whole variety of things that are defined. Go on to page 27, subparagraph XI, actually subparagraph IX. Insurance premiums are a covered expense, but then there's an exception, but not including any premiums or expenses for rental interruption insurance. So if the landlord's going to buy rental interruption insurance, this tenant isn't contributing to the cost of that. XI, service contracts. There's a variety of exclusions. So regularly scheduled maintenance of HVAC is covered, but not any repairs and replacements. So if you need an extraordinary repair, if you need to replace part of the system, this tenant isn't contributing to that, nor are they contributing to any repairs or replacements of elevators, nor are they contributing to fire safety systems, including sprinkler systems and emergency lighting. So no replacements or costs attributable to other tenants in the building for systems above a basic level. No security that is required above a standard level. And my point simply is that this tenant will not pay certain things. Government lease, I told you earlier that the federal government lease, the increases are limited to the consumer price index. Page 28 is the questionnaire, the same one the assessor has made reference to. And you'll note the calculation of the $11.27 per square foot. And so just a couple of things and I will be complete. The assessor has noted that all the leases are gross or semi-gross. So again, I come back to two critical issues here. What's the appropriate rent per square foot? Not $17.68, I say. Secondly, what's the cap rate? All buildings fit into a spectrum, and you're going to hear me speak again about this spectrum and where the various buildings we deal with today fall. The assessor has put the capitalization rate below the 20th percentile for OFB buildings, and the subject is not OFB. Subject to questions, that is my submission.
Spacek, any questions?
Just quickly, yes. Mark, would you please turn to page 19 of your brief?
Yes.
And so just so I'm clear, and you did explain it, I believe, and just when you're, so the way you got to these net rents you're using, you took the rental income before any recoveries or storage, and then you minused the total expenses per square foot. For that, you're getting $11.27 a square foot for expenses, correct?
Yes.
Okay, so when this owner, the total expenses being reported on this property as according to the mailer, $1,398,000, correct?
Correct.
So that would be the combination of general administration, utilities, maintenance, and property taxes.
Yes.
And so on the bottom left, when the owner of this is of the mailer on your page 28, but just from my understanding, when the owner recovers $487,000 for utilities and maintenance recoveries from the tenants, and then they recover $380,000 for the property tax recoveries, you're not including anything of that approximate $800,000 to pay those back, right? You're just taking the expenses off the lease, but you're not including any of the recoveries the owner's getting?
That's correct.
Okay, so if you included the $800,000 recoveries, that would reduce the expenses by $800,000 effectively, correct?
Yes, I believe so.
Okay, so that would, like, depending how you're netting out your rents, it would lead to a higher net rent acquired by the owner.
It would lead to a higher net rent based on the calculation, but we've still got the market to look at. So you've essentially got a two-pronged approach from me. And as I said, we've used a blended rate of $14.88, which in my view is actually above market and certainly above the OFB market you presented. So that's why I think it's quite a conservative number.
Thank you, Mark. And just so I'm clear here on the vacancy, you're using the 12% market vacancy, and this property, I don't know the last time it's had any vacancy issues, correct? It's been at 0% vacancy for years.
At the relevant point in time, that's correct.
Okay, thank you. That's all my questions.
Thank you, Ms. Knight. Any questions?
So the difference we're talking about is the 3% and the 7% in expenses, correct? And the cap rate and your NOIs.
That's correct.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Hutchins, any questions?
No, thank you. I'm good.
Mr. Newman, so I'm going back to your page number 19, your workup.
Yes.
And I see that you take, in a lot of cases, you show the gross rent and you take out your expenses and get I guess a net rent. But then you're also taking a non-recoverable. So aren't you basically collecting the non-recoverable twice if you do that?
No.
No?
No.
Okay.
Because the net rent concept, and I think this will become clear when I make the non-recoverable submission. What the net rent concept does is it assumes that there are a variety of expenses that are paid by tenants. What the non-recoverable does is it recognizes that there are expenses that are never paid by tenants and yet reduce the landlord's income, and those need to be taken into account.
You also showed in your lease a lot of expenses that can't be recovered from that tenant, but it's not true that most tenants don't pay for capital expenditures like anything that's a capital nature, like replacing the elevator, replacing the heating system. They usually only pay for repairs.
But this tenant doesn't pay for repairs either.
Well, in that case, some, but I'm just saying that you're also emphasizing replacements. Replacements are always a tenant's obligation.
Tenant or landlord?
Always a landlord's obligation, sorry. You got that right. Thanks for correcting me.
And the answer is generally yes. But again, this tenant has removed not only replacements, but also repairs.
Okay. And a government lease from the federal government refuses to pay for rental interruption insurance. If you have a lease with the federal government, are you really worried about rental interruption on that lease?
When the space burns down, they're not going to pay rent. That's what rental interruption insurance covers.
But then they have a total loss that you recover on the building on the.
When there's a fire and for 6 months the space can't be occupied because the sprinklers flooded the building,
Yeah.
there'll be no rent to be paid. You want your rental interruption insurance to cover that.
And there's usually a provisional lease that if it is down for 6 months, the leases are canceled and the landlord has the option of doing so.
But that's a different issue.
Yeah.
What we're talking about now is the expense. And all I'm saying to you is that It is typical for landlords to place rental interruption insurance, and the cost of that is absorbed as part of operating costs by tenants.
Okay. That's my questions. Thank you. Okay, now let's go on to.
Do I do non-recoverable now?
If you, yeah, you know, do it now.
Yes. I'll do it once.
Perfect.
Yes.
So you go forward with that.
All right. So, and again, I won't belabor this because I believe everyone has now heard this. So the issue here is not a conceptual one. The assessor recognizes that there are certain expenses which a landlord is not able to recover. The issue is how much?
Sorry, do we have this report?
Yes.
Yes, Mr.
I know I've heard it before, Jaswinder, but do we have this report on the docket?
It's the last thing on the agenda, I believe.
Is it? That's a municipal act, I see.
Just 1 second.
Hang on. I've got it here, so hang on. It's the second last thing. Non-recoverable expense submission.
Did you just update it? Okay, sorry. I'm sorry. Let me go back in and check again. No, I still don't see it.
Yeah, it's the second last thing. The file name is Non-Recoverable Expense Submission 2023.
Last thing I see is the municipal act.
It's just above that, a municipal act.
Then above that is Edmonton, 33 Edmonton.
Oh.
I don't see anything uploaded in the last, other than 4 hours ago.
I've got page 19 as non-recoverable.
Sorry, let me try again. I'll go out of the email and back in again.
Item 19.
You have that, Ms. Searching?
Just hang on a minute. I'm just trying to find the email again. So I see up to item 8, 230. Oh, now I see it. Now it's there. Thank you. I got it. Sorry. I just had to go in and out again. Okay. Sorry, Mark. Go ahead.
That's quite all right. So what I was saying was the issue here is not a conceptual one. The assessor agrees that there are expenses which to some extent are not recoverable. The issue here is the amount, and the issue here is the type of expenses. So what I tell you starting at page 2 of my submission is that all the appraisers, the schools that teach these courses, they all write about the fact that there are expenses that are not recoverable that need to be taken into account. Look at page 3 of the brief. You can see the quote in the top third of the page. This is from the Sauder School of Business, the real estate courses. Appraisers should also account for non-recoverable expenses. Most important non-recoverables to be aware of are space marketing costs, which include tenant inducements and leasing costs, and an allowance for structural or mechanical repairs. Bottom of page 3, a variety of expenses are listed of different types. I'll mention professional fees legal, professional fees other, tenant improvements, leasing improvements, depreciation and mortgage interest are noted. I would not treat those for our purposes as a non-recoverable. On to the next page, marketing and advertising, free rent. These are all appropriately allowed. So the history, of course, is that going back to the 2018 cycle, there was what we would characterize as a 7% allowance. Starting with 2020, it became a 2% allowance. Now we're back up to a 3% allowance for 2023. Bottom of page 5, I note valuation principles, unrecovered expense allowance, and I note certain of the assessing authorities and what they have to say about the issue. So Saskatchewan Assessment Management Agency, SAMA, there are excerpts from their manuals. They make reference in the middle of page 6 to the first bullet, non-recoverable operating expenses, expenses not passed on to tenants. Page 7, examples, legal and audit fees, structural repairs, such as a roof, wall repairs, parking lot resurfacing, advertising and promotion, leasing commission. And I know the assessor is of the view that leasing commissions should not be recognized as an expense. I'm not sure why the assessor is of that view, since all the other assessing authorities and since the authors who teach the courses believe that leasing commissions are an appropriate expense. Then we have Municipal Property Assessment Corporation, MPAC, the Ontario Assessing Authority. On to page 8. In the middle of the page, the valuation report for office and retail properties. There's a quote, 3 paragraphs. In the middle section, even with a triple net lease, there are expenses associated that are not necessarily passed through to the tenant but absorbed by the owner. These expenses, referred to as non-recoverable, may include such items as marketing costs, large capital cost projects, legal and audit fees, ongoing expenses associated with vacant areas of the building, insurance. So there's a variety of those types of things. And then, so what we did is we did an analysis, and what we determined from our analysis is that there was a range of, from looking at 17 properties, there was a range that showed the from 0.7% to 66%. And if we took off the top 3 and bottom 3, bringing it down to 11 properties, the range narrowed to 3.25 to 13.21, with 7 of the properties concentrated in the 4 to 8% range. So I recognize, obviously, that these expenses are going to vary from year to year, but that's why you need to look for a stabilized amount. What follows on all the attachments is all the authorities I've made reference to, the excerpts from Sauter, the excerpts from the appraisal textbook. So again, the issue isn't the concept, the issue is the quantum and what expenses should be allowed. That's my submission.
Thank you. Mr. Spacek, any questions?
I have no questions. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
You, Ms. Knight, any questions?
No, sir.
Ms. Hutchins, any questions?
No questions, thank you.
Thank you. And I don't either. Thank you, Mr. Newman. Thanks. Okay, so we'll next deal with the item number 3, 214 Mcdermott Avenue. Ms. Spacek, when you're ready, you can proceed.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. We are looking at roll number 13060872000 Mcdermott Avenue. Roll number, roll year 2023 with an assessed value of 1,410,000. I'm actually making a recommendation, so the value I will be requesting today, we're currently at 1,410,000. I'm asking for 1,307,000, and this is achieved by strictly removing, changing the total square footage from 8,725 to 8,097. So this is removing, approximately 700 square feet from I believe it's the second floor, which is the third premise of this property. So that's the only thing changing. The rest I am defending, and so my total potential market income is changing from 118,781 to 110,171, and that's just matching the leasable area on the actual lease. As I had this property last year, and the change did not seem to go through, so I'm just adjusting that, and we'll be defending that value.
Can I ask the assessor to detail the balance of the calculation?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay, well, clarification is good for all of us, so go ahead.
Yeah, so we have the first, I'll just do the total, potential gross income. We have 110,171, less vacancy of 12%, which is removing $13,221. gives us an effective market income of $96,951. And this, we're using a 3% expenses, which is $2,909. And we're having a $10 shortfall still, which is $9,716.
Pardon me, that number again?
That would be $9,716
Thank
for
you.
the shortfall.
Yeah.
And we have a total NOI of $84,326. And this set us capitalized at 6.45%. Would be a total market value of $1,307,380, rounded down to $1,307,000. When everybody's ready, I will present.
If it helps the panel, and if it helps Mr. Spacek, my concern will be the capitalization rate only.
Yeah.
Okay, that helps.
Okay, I will stick to the points here. We have a originally built 4-story office building down in the Exchange District on 214 Mcdermott. You'll see it was originally built in 1903, and we have effective years of 1977. The total square footage over the 4 stories is 13,125, and according to my new calculations, we have 8,097 square feet of it as leasable. You'll see on page 2, subject photos, narrow 4-story building. You will see that on my page 3, I'm just showing there is a net lease in place for this property of $14, and it's on my page 10, but that lease runs from September 1st, 2018 to February 29th, 2014. It was Skip the Dishes. They have since left the property. It is, from the last time that I looked, it is still being look for sublease, but they're still, again, the owner is still receiving their rent on this property. So there's a $14 net rent in place. Our average model rental rate for this property, if you look at picture, it doesn't really matter. We're only looking at.
Sorry, I can't hear you.
It is a total rental rate averaging $1,361 across the whole building. And as I went over, we have a 12% vacancy loss, 3% expenses, and a $10 shortfall. At a capitalization rate of 6.45, that gives us our total value that I have let everyone know is now $1,307,000. And again, 6.45% cap rate. This is a sorry, I've lost my scroll wheel. Just wait one sec. So again, we have a 4-story OFC, and we do not have a rental, a capitalization rate column or row on our chart. I should say row for the OFC category. But as you know, our last property, which was 6.45, our current property in OFC is at 6.4, or it was at 6.65. Our current property today is at 6.45. Again, this is under the OFB 6.75, and if you look under that, the third row of the office section at the top of my capitalization rate chart on page 7, we have OFSs, 2 rows, suburban A and B, but they are the same cap rates. The 20th percentile is 5.6 up to 6.9. That's for OFSs, so only up to 3 stories. And just so everybody knows, page 9 going forward, we have included the mailer. Page 10 shows the lease in place, and again, the COVID questionnaire. And it says has not impacted. But if there's any more questions, please let me know. That's my presentation.
Thank you. Mr. Newman, any questions?
So just focusing on capitalization rate. And let's look at your photos. So page 2, clearly this is a building that is in the Exchange District. Would you agree?
I agree with you.
And it's got no access to the walkway system, correct?
No, you would be walking to Portage Avenue for that.
And it's got no underground parking, correct?
I couldn't imagine.
And so why do you think just before I get there, the property has a heritage designation, correct?
Correct.
And the heritage designation do you agree that it prohibits alterations to the exterior of the building?
I would agree with you. That's the point of it. Yeah.
So, and do you agree when a property owner is restricted in terms of what they can do with the building, in terms of making alterations, that creates a greater risk?
I mean, having to keep the brick might be a little more expensive to, keep that brick look, and to keep its character might be a little more expensive to renovate the exterior for sure.
So, and again, in the spectrum of buildings, as we talked about at the beginning, factors like location, age, amenities, size, all those things, would you agree that this property is of lesser quality than the OFB buildings in the downtown core?
Yes, I would agree with you.
So then why is the capitalization rate set at 6.45% when, and I'm not saying I agree with the OFBs, but when you set the OFBs downtown core at 6.75%?
Like, why is the cap rate lower for our subject property than the OFBs at 6.75?
Yes.
Well, yeah, like in general, when you have to rent out 8,000, like there again, many reasons. You could, for one, I'll just point out, it's a smaller building, could be easier to rent, less risk in 9,000 square feet versus 100,000 square feet. You might have, every building is going to be different in its exact workup for what it would sell for, right? And then what that NOI is determines the cap rate. And is 6.45% being under the OFBs unreasonable? It doesn't seem like that to me. Like, it's because you have a bigger building in a different class doesn't necessarily mean it has to have a higher cap rate.
With a bigger building, you get a diversity of tenants, correct?
If it's multi-tenant, yeah, for sure.
And when you have a diversity of tenants, with a single tenant building, which is what this building is at the moment, if you lose your tenant, you're 100% vacant.
Yes, if it's laid out as a single tenant occupancy, and if you don't have it split up and you lose all your tenants at once, that's how it's set up.
Those are my questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Hutchings, any questions?
Yes, two quickly. Jonathan, any information on that 2017 sale at $1.5 million?
When I read over that sales questionnaire, I believe it was the last one. There was nothing that stuck out as a major non-arms like sale from my memory, but I don't have the sales questionnaire with me.
Okay. And my last question is, what is the effective year built on this property?
Effective year is 1977.
So originally built in 1903, 1977, yes. Reflecting upgrades to the property?
Yeah, just basic upgrades to the property, keep it going, basic heating upgrades, anything to keep it running. Mark and I walked through this building last cycle, and it was standard hardwood floors, older building downtown, just.
Okay. Thank you. That's all my questions, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Ms. Knight, any questions?
No, my question about the sale was already answered. Thanks.
Okay. Mr. Spacek, I'm going to just take you to the city's chart that shows cap rates.
Yes, I'm there.
And Middle Office I see is the first one. And it shows that downtown A's basically are 6% across the spectrum, looks like.
Yeah.
And B's are a little bit higher. They're 6.75.
Yep.
Got B's?
Yep.
So a B building has a higher cap rate than an A building.
Yes, that's true for the cycle.
And wouldn't a C then have a higher cap rate than a B?
Again, not necessarily. Again, these OFAs and OFBs are usually much larger buildings, and even if you have multiple tenants, if you're having trouble with your building, it's a large space to fill. Like, we're going 40, 50 to over 100,000 some of the building square footage. So smaller buildings can definitely, in my mind, sell for a cap rate that's going to be lower. It doesn't just automatically going to be higher than what the Winnipeg OFB market is, especially if you're a 5,000 square foot building, 10,000, 15,000. It's just there's less risk involved in that size of building.
Okay, thank you. Okay, Mr. Newman.
So I'll focus on the cap rate simply. And, you know, and I find it interesting, and I think we're going to see this on another property we come to, where the size of the building seems to create a significant influence in the assessor's mind in terms of the capitalization rate. From my perspective, when you have a larger building, you've got a diversity of tenants. When it's a multi-tenant building, your risk of a tenant failure is diminished. When you've got a smaller building that is configured as a single tenant building, as this one presently is, of course, if you lose a tenant, then you have an issue. And as the assessor noted, although the premises are under a lease still, in fact, the premises are vacant because Skip the Dishes has, excuse the pun, skipped the premises. And I don't mean that in a bad way, but they've moved on to the True North Square by coincidence, as it turns out. So I just think, again, that you have a progression of capitalization rates that is reflected. We see that, generally speaking, and we'll see that this afternoon as we go through the properties, that as we go to the Cs generally, as we go to the Ds, the capitalization rate goes up because all those things that make up a building, location, amenities, all those things diminish in quality as you go into the progression from A to B to C to D. And I don't understand why the capitalization rate on this property is set at 6.45%, especially considering its heritage designation, which creates additional restrictions in terms of a landlord's ability to make alterations to the space. So I'm asking for a higher capitalization rate. Our request was for 7.75%. The assessors now made the adjustment to the square footage. That's appreciated, and that leads to the recommendation at $1,307,000. But I think the capitalization rate needs to be higher. Thank you.
Thank you. Mrs. Spacek, any questions? Mr. Spacek, do you have any questions?
Is he frozen?
Looks like.
Hey, Jason, you're on mute.
He's more than
It looks like it's frozen. Can you text him, Jeff?
Yeah, I'm gonna send him an email.
Okay. I'm not sure if he heard any of your presentation there, Mark.
Oh.
He didn't. We won't ask any questions.
Would it be appropriate if we ask questions right now, Harvey?
I think I'd like to have the assessor ask those questions if we can get them soon. And he should hear the questions we ask as well.
Mm-hmm.
You know.
I just had one for clarification for Mr. Newman.
Yeah, let's just wait till we get John.
Okay, thank you.
You know, while we're waiting, I'm just gonna step out for a second.
He's just rejoining. I think he just disconnected.
Does this happen a lot?
Tabs, other issues.
Okay, Mr. Chair, Mr. Sass is asking for a recess call. His computer is restarting. Can we go for recess?
Okay, we'll take
Thank you.
recess. How do you think we need?
He said they just need a 5 minutes.
5 minutes, okay.
Did we finish 214?
Okay, so Jonathan, when we lost you, we're going to ask you if you had any questions to ask Mr. Newman. I don't know if you heard his arguments or when you froze up.
I did, and I have no questions for Mark. I heard till the end and then I reset.
It's fine. Is that, do you have any questions?
Yes, thank you. Mr. Newman, you said the only issue was the cap rate. The assessors adjusted NOI as 84326. Your actual workup on your last page, pardon me, page 18, your NOI is 87494. Which NOI are you accepting or using in your calculation?
I'm accepting the assessor's NOI because the difference was that when I accepted the assessor's gross potential income, I omitted to take into account the effect of the square footage change, even though I raised it in my brief. So I'm accepting the assessor's net operating income of $84,326.
And the capitalization rate you're using is 7.75% equals 1,881,000. 1 million, pardon me, yes, 808. Would you mind confirming your requested value?
Yes. So when I multiply 84,326 by 7.75, I get $1,088,077.
Okay. Thank you. That's all my questions.
Thank you. Ms. Knight, do you have any questions?
No, Robert asked the ones that I was looking for. Thanks.
Thank you. And I don't either, so we go on with our next agenda item, which is 200 Waterfront Drive. Mr. Spacek, when you're ready.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. We are at 200 Waterfront Drive. This is a roll number 13096049-104. We have a 2023 assessed value of $8,048,000. This is a 4-story OFB that is located on the corner of Waterfront and Lombard. If you look at my page 2, you can see a triangular built property. This includes parkade in it, indoor parking. We have 45,123 square feet gross, and then the leasable square footage is 41,477. This was built in 2001. You turn on page 2, at the bottom of page 2, you can see the side of the building that looks out on the river and over the river at St. Boniface. You can see at the bottom there is the entrance to the parkade. You see on page 3 the the corner architecture of the triangular building and the entrance on Lombard on the bottom of page 3. And I've included an aerial view as well on page 4. So again, we have a 41,476 square foot property. If you turn to my page 6, the income approach value for the building, which is the only thing under contention. The parkade is, I'll save time and we're not in argument on the parkade portion of value, but I will go over it quickly. We have 6 leasable units in the property that are leased out. We have a rental ranging from $14.91 up to $17.25, or sorry, up to $18.45. This works out to an average in the building of $15.75. So an average rental rate of $15.75. And with our OFB parameters, you're going to see we have a vacancy loss of 11% for the 2023 cycle. We have expenses at 3%, shortfall at $12, overall capitalization rate at 6.75. So you can see with that OFB classification, it's giving it the 6.75. And this is the total value for the office portion of the building, not the parkade, $7,543,000. And you'll notice on my page 7, we have a workup for the parkade. There's 32 stalls. We have a net rate of $92 a square foot at 7% cap for parking structures. That works out to $505,000. When you add those together, you will see a total value of $8,048,000. And I've also included our same cap rate as before, as we went over, again, 6.75 for OFBs. And you'll notice on page 13 going forward is my OFB study that I went through in detail on the building that was 2 doors down at 111 Lombard. So we'll leave it at that. Memory is fresh. If we turn to page 18, we have the mailer for the property. So they have a total lease area of 41,116 reported. You can see total rental income, 891,000. If you add the storage, parking, and recoveries, you up that to 1,141,000. And you'll notice the expenses for the property are 559,000 approximately. And that gives us a total of net operating income on this property of 582,000. And our NOI, just in comparison, our market NOI driven by the market is 509,000. So even if you were to take off the leasing commissions at the bottom of 60,000, we're still undershooting the reported NOI for the reference here. You can see all of the leases of this property. You know, they started around 07. Some of them more recent, the second floor ones in 2016 and 20, but they are ending. 3 of the major leases are ending at 2021 at the end of our reference period. COVID questionnaire, they put moderate impact. They put, for question number 2, were tenants at this location closed temporarily due to public health measures? Yes. Question 4, in 2020, has the property experienced an increase in operating expenses in response to COVID? They put yes, and they explained that it was enhanced janitorial cleaning, enhanced security. And then question 4 at the bottom, were the increased expenses successfully passed on to the tenants? Yes. And then 5 and 6, no. And the rest of the answers were no on the questionnaire. And that is my presentation. If you have any more questions, please let me know. Thank you.
Mr. Newman, any questions?
Yes. So, again, looking at page 6, so this is an OFB building, correct?
Yes.
And And all the rents shown on page 6 are model generated, correct?
Correct.
And so we get a blended rate of $15.74 a square foot.
Yes.
So now let's go to, and again, I say to the panel, I won't belabor this because we've covered this, but page 13 is the same OFB analysis that you have presented in the context of 111 Lombard, correct?
Correct, Mark.
And so again, just so we're clear, page 13, top section, stabilized revenue for OFB buildings, average 1435, weighted 1439, median $14, correct?
Correct.
And again, almost without exception, the buildings that are listed on page 14, 15, and 16 and 17 are all found in the downtown core, Portage to Broadway, Main Street to Memorial, correct?
Correct.
The building that is closest is the building at the bottom of page 14, 161 Portage, correct?
Correct.
And that has an average, 3-year average rent of $13.94. And again, 161 Portage is connected through the walkway system, correct?
Correct, Mark.
And this property with an effective age of 2001 gets a cap rate of 6.75. And as you noted, let's go to page 19 of your report, the questionnaire. And as you properly noted, 3 of the spaces have leases expiring December 31 of 2021, correct?
That is correct, Mark.
And that's approximately 75% of the square footage of the building, correct?
That is correct, Mark.
And so what a buyer of this building would be faced with is the knowledge that buying the building in April 1 of 21, 9 months later, by the end of December of that year, 75% of the square footage would be unoccupied unless the landlord could find new tenants, correct?
That is true, Mark. They would have to find tenants.
And does that not, in your mind, increase the risk of this investment?
I would say that is, again, the same part of owning a large office building with multi-tenants is there is a cycle to it, and every year one of the reasons we have an 11% vacancy on OFBs and those higher numbers is that over the years there will be vacancy. We're not saying there will never be vacancy, and then we're giving them shortfall as well to help them through that time of vacancy. So it's part of the model. It's part of the income approach where you can't just instantly increase the vacancy as soon as it's vacant because, again, it is part of the cycle.
And I don't think anybody's asking you to increase the vacancy. But my question is, it's one thing to be 11% vacant, 4,000 square feet, 4,400 square feet. It's another thing to be 75% vacant, 30,000 square feet. Do you agree that increases the risk of the investment?
I agree that if you were buying a building with 75% of it vacancy, you have more work to do than if it was totally full, yes.
And as part of having more work to do, as you put it, would you agree that that would suggest a higher capitalization rate is appropriate?
I think at this time when it's not, there's no need. I think that's baked into the capitalization rate. But if for some reason, for example, this building was vacant 75% for a year or two, and then you can start to look at that. But if it just gets leased up right away, the space, there's not as, I don't see a need to adjust that cap rate as of now before the vacancy is occurring.
Are you suggesting that every Class B office building where a rate of 6.75% is applied has baked into it, as you put it, the anticipation that 75% of the building will become vacant?
I'm not trying to say that every building is in the same position. I'm saying that the average OFB vacancy of 13% in the marketplace is because there is higher than 13% and lower than 13%. In this case, there is, if you're looking ahead past the reference date, then there will be at that point some risk involved in that loss of, or like the tenant leaving past the reference date. But again, do I think that vacancy do I think that cap rate needs to be adjusted now for it? No, is my opinion on it.
Okay. And all the leases, almost all the leases in this property are gross leases, correct?
From my understanding, yes, they look all gross.
Those are my questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Knight, do you have any questions?
I do not.
Mr. Hutchings, do you have any questions?
No questions, thank you.
Mr. Patrick, my only question is, so you indicated that there are going to be some leases that are expiring, I guess, in the next year, that or at the end of this time span?
Yes, at the end of December 31st, 2021, 3 of the leases are expiring.
Okay. And at the time, I guess, because we can't use hindsight, I don't know what's going on now. It doesn't really matter. But from your experience, when a lease is slated to expire, do all the tenants leave or do some leave their leases?
Yeah, I'm sure it's different in every case. Sometimes they renew, sometimes they leave. I don't know what the most common is or not, to be honest.
Okay, it's a question you can answer. The reason I asked you the question, I didn't think you could, but based on Mr. Newman's questions to you, it appeared that he asked you similar types of questions because he's assuming it looks like everybody's going to be gone and the building is going to be 75% vacant. So That's the reason why I asked you the question.
Yeah, no, I agree.
Okay, it's probably a better question for me to ask Mr. Newman. I'm sure he'll have an answer. Thank you. So that's my question. So we're
thank you, Mr. Chair.
Mr. Newman, you can proceed.
Let me start where we ended off.
Okay.
A national bank gave notice in 2020 that they did not intend to renew their lease. There was no prospect that they would stay upon the expiry of their lease. There was no prospect that they would renew because they gave notice that they were departing. So therefore, the landlord now is at risk to fill 75% of the building within 9 months of the effective date of acquisition in a market that has become saturated with office space by virtue of the entry of True North into the marketplace, by virtue of COVID and the trend to remote work. The assessor, bravely, I will respectfully suggest, will not recognize that that will create a greater risk. At one point, he says it's baked into the cap rate of 6.75%. And I say there is no way a 75% vacancy is baked into a cap rate on any type of building. So what do we have here? We have issues about the rent. We have issues about the cap rate. We have issues about the non-recoverable. You've heard me on the non-recoverable. I'm not going to repeat myself. The assessor has used $15.74 a square foot as the rent. Where does that come from? Well, presumably that comes from the evidence the assessor has brought forward. And that evidence is this study that appears in the assessor's report, beginning at page 13, where the median rate is $14.35. The weighted average is $14.39. Sorry, the average rate is $14.35. The weighted is $14.39, and the median is $14. There's no $15.74 on the overall statistics. Then when you dig into the individual buildings, the building that is closest in terms of location, 161 Portage, has a rate of $13.94 a square foot as the stabilized rent. So if you look now to page 3 of my submission, again, gross rents, you've got face rents on each of these leases, but you've got a shortfall of $12 a square foot. And what I did preliminarily is I subtracted those $12 a square foot. And you can see in the middle of page 3 of my brief, what I did is I said, okay, if you took $12 off the face rates, what you would have is $15.50, $10.50, $14 as the rates. But then I looked to the marketplace as well. I looked to a number of rents, frankly, that the assessor put in the study. That's part of his brief because I had access to the study. And I noted some of the standalone buildings that are not connected to the walkway system, like 200 Main, like 423 Main, like 363 Broadway, where you've got rents of $13.84, $12.92, $13.30. These buildings, I'll suggest, certainly 363 Broadway and 200 Main and 175 Hargrave. 175 Hargrave is connected to the walkway system. The others are not, but they are in that downtown core that I call between Portage and Broadway and between Memorial and Main. And so I suggest they have locational advantages. The subject is somewhat out of the way. It's more locationally distant. And in the end, I used a $13 rate. In terms of the capitalization rate, I increased the capitalization rate to 7%. I did it for a number of reasons, one of which is that this building, as I just said, is locationally out of the way. It's more remote. Secondly, we are in the COVID environment where it has become very difficult to lease office space. Thirdly, this building has 75% of its space with a tenant who has made known to the landlord, we are leaving, we are not staying. And in my view, that is why the rate should go to 7% with the $13 rate. As the assessor noted, the parking value at $504,000 is being accepted. And the combined value, if you look at my page 18, is $6,321,000. Thank you.
Any questions, Mr. Stachek?
Just one quickly, similar to the other property. Just when you go to your page 18 and the $13 net rate, sorry, I don't see the same calculation. How is that a $13 market rent, or is that $13 from the actuals?
So it's a combination of both. If you go back to page 3 of the text, you'll see that I make reference there to the face rates and that I make reference to the shortfall of $12. And I tell you, if you subtract the shortfall, the assessor's shortfall, then you see the rates $15.50, $10.50, $14. But I also tell you that the expenses were $559,000, which calculates to $13.50 a square foot. And then I looked at the market as well. and I looked at the locational disadvantages of the subject, and I selected $13 a square foot.
And thank you, Mark. And similar to our other property, the face rates don't take into account any of the recoveries for utilities, maintenance, or property tax.
The face rates,
When you're minusing the shortfall from the total.
the face rates do not take those recoveries into account.
And if we did include those recoveries that the owner received, that would increase those face rates slightly, correct?
Slightly, yes.
Thank you. That's all my questions.
Thank you. Mr. Hutchins, any questions?
So I'm just trying to get to the NOIs. We've got two income streams here. Is that right, Mr. Newman?
We do, that's correct.
Yeah, okay. So I believe you're accepting the assessor's NOI for the parking and then, but applying a different cap rate. Is that accurate?
No, same cap rate. We're accepting the parking completely.
No, sorry, different than the assessor's cap rate, but the assessor's NOI you're accepting?
On the building portion.
And the parking?
Sorry, wait. On the parking portion, I'm
Yeah.
accepting the assessment completely.
Yeah, okay. Okay. I guess my only question is, if I understand this correctly, the leases are expiring December 21st, December of 2021. The base we're looking at is April 1st, 2021. Is that not considered post-reference economic factor?
Well, all I'm telling you is that the tenant told the landlord in 2020 that they were not renewing. And I'm suggesting to you, therefore, at April 1 of 2021, the landlord knew that subject to their ability to find replacement tenants, there was a risk that the building would be 75% vacant.
Okay. Thank you. That answers that. Thank you. That's all my questions. Thank you.
Thank you. And I don't have any questions. So we can proceed.
I do.
Oh, I thought I asked you. You said,
No, sorry.
sorry.
So you're differing on square footage just by a little, correct?
It appears that way by a couple hundred square feet.
Okay, and you're also only including 3% non-recoverables on this one, not 7?
It appears that's what I did on this calculation.
Okay, just making sure that that's what you wanted. That's all I'm asking. Okay.
Okay, thank you. And I already indicated that I had no questions, so we can proceed. And our next property is at 183 Kennedy Street. Mr. Spashik, when you're ready.
Yes, sir. Thank you, Mr. Chair. We're at roll number 12093645000. This is the address 183 Kennedy Street. We have a 2023 value of $1,942,000. Sorry, we have a gross floor area of 10,578 square feet with a leasable area of 9,300. We have 2 actual year builts on the 2 pieces of the property of 1970 and 1985. And we have a total effective years of 1976. You can see at the bottom of page 2 and page 3 the pictures of the property. Again, we have a 2-story suburban downtown office, but we have it classified as our OFS category, which is a suburban OFS. If we turn to page 4, we have a net lease on the property, 6,200 square feet at $14.52. If we turn to page 5, we have 9,300 square feet at this property, and we have a rental ranges above ground of $14.91 up to $17.42. and a substandard basement 1,500 square feet at 435. We have a vacancy loss of 11%, 3% expenses, $8 shortfall for OFSs, and an overall capitalization rate of 5.4%. And if my memory serves me correct, Mark, I believe we are in agreement on the rental rate, if you don't mind, maybe save time, but
Yes.
yeah, so again, we are in agreement on that overall rental rate. Again, our capitalization rates, you'll see they range from, on my page 8, we have suburban A and B OFSs. They range from 5.6 to 6.9. The model is generating a 5.4% cap rate, so that's below our low end 20th percentile. Again, model generated. We have a mailer included going forward from page 10. You can see the yearly revenue on the right. And then on page 11 are the leases in place with the Folk Art Council of Winnipeg, floor 200 with a base rent of $14.52. And then the COVID questionnaire, just a minor impact on page 12. And then the only question where they've changed, they have 2 questions they put yes if you turn to the next page on page 13. Question 7, between January 1, 2020 and April 1st, 2021, were new leases negotiated after the effects of COVID-19 became apparent? And then they put yes, Folk Arts provided 3 months base rent free as part of renewal negotiations in the amount of $22,500. And question 9, have any tenants abandoned or breached the terms of their leases as a direct result of COVID? And then yes, MA Laham Law terminated early on November 20, but the lease expired August 2026. So they ended their lease, left 6 years early. And that's the update for the COVID questionnaire. If you have any questions on this property, please let me know. Thank you.
Yes, Mr. Newman.
So page 5 of your brief,
Yes,
the
Mark.
assessment is entirely model generated, correct?
Entirely, yes.
So let's leave the rents aside. This building is downtown.
Correct in your downtown core definition as well.
And it's on the corner essentially of Kennedy. It's just south of the corner of Kennedy and St. Mary's, correct?
That is true.
And it's a multi-tenant building,
That is true.
including some space in the basement.
That is true.
So we've looked at a spectrum of capitalization rates already this afternoon. And this capitalization rate of 5.4%, it's getting into multifamily capitalization rates, isn't it?
Yeah, it's part of our OFS cap rates.
But this building isn't in suburban Winnipeg. This building is downtown, correct?
Yes, any of the 2-story and lower offices are classified as OFS, even though it does officially stand for suburban offices. But again, any 2-story smaller, we don't have a separate downtown office under 2 stories, if that makes sense. So it's under that OFS classification. And yeah, that's the explanation for that one.
So look at your page 8.
On it, Mark.
This is not an A-class suburban building, is it?
I would say it's not a suburban A office, no.
And your page 8 suggests that the 20th percentile for suburban B is 5.6%. So this
20%.
capitalization rate at 5.4% says that it's better than a suburban B building, correct?
Correct. It is under the 20th percentile for our overall suburban BOFS classification.
Does that make any sense to you?
it's a smaller building that's being classified in our OFS portfolio. I mean, why it's below 5.6, I don't exactly know how every capitalization is determined. So that's what I'll leave it at.
It's called the black box of the model, correct?
You have your own name for it, Mark. I don't call it that.
All right. So, all right, I'll leave it there.
Hey, Ms. Knight, any questions?
No, I do not.
Mr. Hutchings, do you have any questions?
No, thank you.
And I don't either, so Mr. Newman, go ahead.
So we have this small building in downtown Winnipeg, and again, notwithstanding that it's designated OFS, it truly is in downtown Winnipeg with everything that means in terms of people coming downtown and having to pay for parking and traffic and all of that. It has 1,500 square feet in the basement. So, you know, approximately 16% of the space is in the basement. Frequently harder to lease, and in this case assigned a substandard basement rate of $4.35. The cap rate puts it below the 20th percentile for suburban A office buildings and suburban B office buildings, because the city's cap rate charts make no distinction between an A and a B. And I'll suggest to you, and you're actually going to see it in one of the subsequent properties, an A-class building, suburban, is 1661 Portage. The assessor puts it in their B-class cap rate, in their B-class rent study. But whether an A or a B, that's an A or a B class building, multi-story, lobby, elevators. This building has none of those. This is, in the relative scheme of the marketplace, I'll suggest to you, a capitalization rate, which is falling into the range of what's being assigned for multifamily, is not appropriate for this type of property. And ultimately, I have selected a 7.25% capitalization rate because I believe that this property is with no elevator and is riskier than many of the other downtown office buildings. The 2020 assessment was $1,406,000. And so this assessment increase to $1,942,000 is 38.12%. Somebody has to explain to me why this small little building suddenly sees its capitalization rate drop to 5.4%. I don't get it. This is not a quality investment from a risk perspective. And if you look at my page 13 of my brief, there is a chart that compares the assessor's 20th and 80th percentile with the broker's low and high suburban B. And you can see the assessor's low is 5.6 and the high is 6.9. Collier's low is 6% and their high is 6.75%. But remember, Collier's includes the closing costs. And so if the closing costs were not included, the capitalization rates would come up somewhat. CBRE is at 7 to 7.5. Cushman is at 6.75 to 7.75. Again, this is not an A, this is not a B, but it doesn't matter. The city's got them in that as a B, as a suburban building. And so I think the 7.25% is reasonable considering what the marketplace is doing. The building right across the street, 444 St. Mary's, classified as Class B, and I believe it's getting 6.75%. So I just don't think 5.4% is appropriate, and that's my submission.
Thank you. Mr. Spacek?
I have no questions, Mr. Chair.
Mr. Hutchings?
No questions, thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Knight.
No, thank you.
And I don't need to thank you. Okay, so we're next on to 275 Broadway. Okay, Mr. Spacek, when you're ready, you can proceed.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I have it right here. All right, we're now on roll number 1209316750, address 275 Broadway. This is the Union Center building. Roll year 2023. We have a $12,635,000 value. You can see this building was built in 1990. We have 7 stories. We have a gross floor area of 87,407 square feet and a leasable area of 68,602. You turn to my page 2, you can see exactly where it's located on the corner of Broadway and Smith, and it also includes the parking lot to the east side of the property. You can see on page 2, picture of the property. Page 3 as well, some more pictures to see where the building is located in the parking lot as well. We turn to our page 6. Again, we have a downtown OFB property. We have 68,601 square feet with rental ranges from $14 up to $17.81. This works out to an average of $14.48 a square foot for this OFB. Again, standard parameters: 11% vacancy, 3% expenses, $12 shortfall, and an overall capitalization rate of 6.75%, staying consistent with our OFBs. And if you turn to page 7, sorry, lost it there. If we turn to page 7, the parking lot itself has 52 stalls. We have a net monthly rent per stall of $92 a square foot, and that is capitalized at 4.5% for a total value of $1,276,000. And you can see on the bottom of page 7, we've just included some stabilized net rents that are obtained by owners across downtown. And you can see the min of that is $63.93. The max is $126 a stall, and the mean and median right around $92. You have 2 lots. You have 1 lot at the corner of Broadway and Donald Street, 108 stalls, or 2 roll numbers. The corner of Broadway and Donald, 108 stalls, using a 53% expense ratio on their on what they reported, and we have a stabilized rent of $92.81, and then 14th comparable on Donald Street is 67 stalls nearby, again netting out to $91.79 after being stabilized. Turn to page 9, again just the OFBs at 6.75. And again, the exact same study, page 11 going forward with the rental rates on the OFBs as has already been went over. We have a 2020 income and expense mailer just showing us totally gross leases in place. We have 65,836 leasable, 4% vacancy. And if we turn to page 18, I've included the mailer showing the gross rents. And the COVID questionnaire on page 19, moderate impact. It says, were tenants at this location closed temporarily? They said yes. Question 4 was yes as well. Have they experienced any increased operating expenses? And then increased cleaning supplies and signage for approximately 8,280 extra in expenses. And the expenses were not passed on to the tenant according to the end of the question. And the rest of the answers are all no. But again, that's my presentation on this property. If you have any questions, please let me know. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Newman, any questions?
Page 2, the overhead photo, the top photo, as you've noted, this is on the corner of Broadway and Smith, correct?
Correct, Mark.
And again, no walkway access, agreed?
No walkway access, agreed.
and it's on the periphery of downtown. So page 6, this is model generated value I'm gathering completely.
Completely, Mark. You are right.
This building is occupied entirely by union offices. Is that correct?
That is correct, Mark.
And page 7, you've got the value of the parking lot. So let's look at your page 8. So on page 8, the effective gross income generated by the parking lot is $57,408.
Correct.
And the total gross income for the entire property is $941,220. I'll suggest to you, my calculator tells me the $57,408 represents 6% of the revenue of the property. And notwithstanding that, the model is assigning a capitalization rate that is 2.25% less to buy 6% of the revenue. Is that correct?
That is correct. All of our downtown surface lots are at 4.5% for parking.
But this downtown lot is dedicated to this building, is it not?
Is there no after work parking allowed, Mark?
Well, in theory, there might be, but it's on the periphery of downtown. So if you're going to a Jets game, for example, is this the place you want to park, or is that a long walk?
No, I'd go here if I'm going to the keg.
Sorry?
I said I'd park here if I'm going to the keg or the Fort Garry, something over there.
Sure, but you've got other lots along Broadway as well where you could park.
Absolutely.
My point is that the building itself isn't creating the demand in the evenings. Do you agree?
You know what? I don't know, but you could argue it's farther. It's going to get less demand than a parking lot beside the Jets on Jets night, for sure. I'd agree.
And then you've got the rent study again, starting at page 11. And again, I'm not going to belabor that. I think we've covered that. The model assigns a rent of $14 and 47 cents a square foot to the property. This property is not part of the study, is it?
No, there's not a net lease in it, so it's not, no.
All right, those are my questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Hutchings. Any questions?
No, thank you. I'm good.
Okay. Ms. Knight, do you have any questions?
Just to be clear, you guys do not agree on the parking, correct?
We do not.
All right, thank you.
I don't have any questions either, so Mr. Newman.
So on to page 3 of my brief. All leases in the building are gross. The face rate is $25.75, but that includes GST. And once you back that out, the face rate is essentially $24.52 per square foot. The assessor's at $14.47. As we've discussed, Broadway and Smith on the periphery of downtown, not connected to the walkway system. If you took the $12 shortfall off the $24.52, you'd be at $12.52 a square foot. Many of the other Class B office buildings that are part of the study, 330 St. Mary's, 330 Portage, 220 Portage, 155 Carlton, all connected to the walkway system with underground parking. There are buildings located essentially 1 block away. 305 Broadway at the corner of Donald and Broadway, 10-story building classified as an OFC. 310 Broadway, 1 block away, 8-story building classified as an OFC. And you know, the city may have classified this as a B, but what I'm going to suggest to you is that if it is a B, it's at the outer range of what is a B building. And so ultimately what we've done is we've looked at rents, which I'll show you in a moment in a chart, but I don't want to bounce you around in terms of the content of the presentation. We'll show you rents at 305 Broadway and at 310 Broadway. We ultimately select $13 a square foot as the rental rate. Let me deal with the parking lot a little bit. Our issue on the parking lot is the net operating income, but more so it's the capitalization rate. So the parking lot generated revenue of $52,749. That's revenue. The assessor has a net operating income of $57,408. That's after expenses. Revenue in 2019 was $62,900. So that's dropped by $10,000. And that's a consequence of COVID. The parking lot is integral to the operation of the building. I suggest investors are not going to pay a capitalization rate of 2.25% lower. They're not going to pay more, in other words, for what is essentially 6% of the revenue on a gross potential income basis for the subject. The other comment I'll make to you is you can't sell the parking lot. It's not on a separate roll. It's on the same lot. And if you want to sell a piece of a lot, you have to do a subdivision. And if you do a subdivision, it's going to cost you money to do a subdivision. So the parking lot and the building are an economic unit. It's a fiction to assume it's saleable, and respectfully, it's a fiction to assume it's saleable at a capitalization rate that is 2.25% below the capitalization rate on the building. Now, in terms of the capitalization rate for let's come back. Non-recoverables, all the leases are gross. You've had my submission in this regard. So again, there's a much different risk on this property. In terms of capitalization rate, let me go to my attachments. So page 19 was the original assessment as it issued. Page 20 is my workup for the value of the building, showing a value of $9,251,000 using $13, the 11% vacancy, the $12 shortfall, the 7% non-recoverable, coming to an NOI of $647,600. So obviously I and the assessor are different there, and then applying a capitalization rate of 7% to arrive at a value of $9,251,000. Page 21, here are some rents listed for 310 Broadway, comparable number 1, at $12.50 a square foot, 2018 lease, comparable number 4, 2017 lease at $7.48 a square foot. If you turn the page, comparable 18, comparable 19, more of 305 Broadway at $12 both a square foot. At 310 Broadway, $8.70, and then 305 again, $12. So you've got a variety of $12 rates. And my point simply is that for this building, this is not And obviously there's a spectrum of buildings, and yes, by its size, maybe it qualifies as a B building. But in terms of the amenities in this building, this is really a very basic building. I think the rent of $14.47 or 48 cents a square foot on average is too high. And so what I'm asking you to do is to take the value on page 20, the 9,251,000, and you would have to add to that, and my apologies for this because I should have had another sheet in here. So I'm going to give you the parking value calculation. I would take the parking NOI of $57,408, and I would capitalize it at 7, which turns into a value of $820,000, $820,114, and I would add that to the 9,251,432, and I would get a value of, bear with me, $10,071,000. And actually, if you go to page 18 of my brief, I've detailed that number for you in the conclusion. I just omitted to give you the spreadsheet for the parking lot value. But again, I would use the assessor's NOI at $57,408, and I would capitalize at the same 7%, and the combined value is $10,071,000. That is my submission.
Patrick, any questions?
I have no questions. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Patrick, any questions?
No questions, thank you.
I have one question, just to be sure. You're saying that the parking lot should be at 7%, and every parking lot would be a different cap rate depending on where it's at, where the city's saying all parking lots in this area are 4.5.
So what the city says, I believe, is that they assign a cap rate of 4.5% to surface parking lots. Having fought surface parking lots with the previous assessor, Lindsay Wareham, for many years, there's absolutely no cap rate evidence for 4.5%. But leave that aside. You buy the parking lot and the building as an economic unit. You're not trading the parking lot separately. You can't sell it separately. You need a subdivision. That's why I'm saying it should get the same cap rate as the building.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, Mr. Mcdermott, I do have a question. So it's your evidence that they don't offer any of their parking other than to tenants in this building at that lot?
No, the assessor said, is there casual parking?
Yes.
And I said, yes, there might be.
So it has a business other than just serving the tenants in the building?
Yes, but you see in the questionnaire that the revenue from parking in 2020 was $57,000. Now revenue.
No, that's not the question I asked you.
I know that.
Okay. I know, and I heard you before. Yeah. Okay. And a surface parking lot very often is just biding its time before it's about to do something else. Is that correct?
Sometimes, yes.
And in the meantime, you're clipping up 1.5% coupon if you go with the city's cap rate.
Theory.
Basically. Okay. Thank you.
But this one isn't biding its time. It's not a freestanding parking lot. It's tied to the
Well, it can
building.
be subdivided. I mean, it wouldn't take legal fees, as you said. It would be a legal process. But it could become a building saving feature.
In theory, it could.
Yeah, sure. Okay. Thank you. And our last property.
No, not the last, the second last.
Second last? Oh, yeah, we have Main Street after. Okay, you're right. 294 Portage Avenue.
Mr. Chair, could I request just like a 10-minute recess?
Thank you.
Yes, you can. We can take a 10-minute recess now.
I would appreciate
you.
that. Thank you so much. I'll be right back.
Okay, we're going to call this hearing back to order, and we'll now proceed with the next property, which is 294 Portage Avenue. And Mr. Spencer, when you're ready, you can take us through your brief.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. We are looking at roll number 1209-332-0000, address 294 Portage. We have a 2023 value of $13,556,000, and this is value I split up between some school, taxable school exempt classification S and taxable T. But for the purposes of our appeal, we are just looking at the value, and then it is split up percentage wise. You will see location of this property on page 2. It is right beside the Canada Life Centre, corner of Donald and Portage. We have a 9-story office building classified as an OFC. We have a gross floor area of 165,000 square feet, and currently there's 119,000 of that leasable. This property was built in 1908, and it has an effective year built of 1930, so that speaks to its quality. We can see that going on to the bottom of page 2, we have again connected by Skywalk to the Canada Life Centre, and it is directly beside the Radisson and the Met Centre. It was purchased so it is owned by Canada Centre. It was purchased April 6th, 2018 for $11,432,500. Again, reviewing the mailer, it was an arm's length sale. Again, and that argument in there for motivation, being beside 2 other Canad properties. But again, that's what it was purchased for 2 years before the reference date. And if we see the work up here, it's split into 2 now, but you'll see on page 5 and going into page 6, we have 86,386 square feet of property being leased out or being valued by different sized units. You can see the average of this income stream for the rental rate is $11.12. And we have a vacancy loss of 12%, expenses 3%, shortfall $10, overall capitalization rate of 7.35%. And we can see for our 40S stream on page 7, there's 33,342 square feet with an average rental rate of $11.23 a square foot. And again, those same exact parameters. So when you total those 2 income streams up, you get the value for the whole building. And that's where that $13,556,000 comes from. You'll see I put a few OFC comparables together on page 8. You can see there's a wide range of years built from 1905. But if you look at the right column in the middle, I have actual years built and the effective years built. So the effective years built, they range from 1935 on the low end at 428 Portage up to year 2000 for 414 Graham and 260 St. Mary's. You can see there's a rental range from $12.50 up to $18 a square foot for, I would argue superior buildings. And you're getting an average rent of $14.32 and a median of 14. Again, this is above our almost $11. We have $11 on the subject property, and I'm showing $14 in comparables. I do believe the comparables are of higher quality, and it's it can be difficult to find such large square footage comparables downtown for an OFC, built in with an effective year of 1930. So I will just point that out. And 10 for our capitalization rate chart. Again, we don't have that OFC cap rate, but this one's at 7.35. So again, for this larger, older OFC, it is above our downtown OFB of 6.75, and it is on the high end or above the high end for our OFSs at the high end of 6.9 in the 80th percentile. And again, I've included the mailer, 2020 income and expense mailer for this property. And if you notice the way they report even their NOI on page 15 is 47,618. Again, very low. Doesn't not necessarily a realistic NOI, so we stick to market. We have some leases in the building that are all gross rents or semi-gross rents throughout. And page 21 is COVID questionnaire. Again, a lot of unknown and not known yet answers. Again, that's how this one was filled out. And if you have any questions, that's my presentation. Thank you.
Do you have any questions?
Yes. So, let's start on your page 15. And you talked there about the net operating income of $47,618.
Yes,
And you said that was not realistic, and therefore you stick to market. That's what you said, correct?
correct, Mark.
So go to the bottom of page 14. The last entry is mortgage interest, correct?
Correct.
276,531. The entry above that is depreciation, $405,033. Those two items total $681,564. If you add those back to the net operating income on page 15 of $47,618, you get $729,182. Does that seem like a more realistic net operating income to you?
Absolutely.
Right. Now, Mr. Spacek, you and I have had many occasions to speak about this building, haven't we?
Oh, we are in it, Mark.
And this building, you would agree with me, has had vacancy in excess of 20% for many, many years.
I would agree. That is very true, Mark.
To your knowledge, having looked back at the records and history of this building, has this building in the last 5 years ever generated a net operating income higher than $729,182?
From memory, Mark, I don't think so.
Okay. And you noted when you spoke about the purchase that there's an argument for motivation because Canad owns the adjacent property, the Radisson Hotel, correct?
It's true.
And Canad owns the property adjacent on Donald across the back lane, the Metropolitan Entertainment Center. And so is it a reasonable position that Canad may have been unduly motivated to acquire this property?
Yeah, I believe there's motivation to fill that corner. It makes sense that you would buy it.
And so would you therefore agree that the sale is something that could not be relied upon as being indicative of market value?
I think that exact sale price, yeah, you could argue some motivation, absolutely.
All right. Now, have you inspected the building?
I have not been through it. I imagine you and I will go through it.
Let's look at your page 5 and then on to 6. So
Yes.
This is the portion of the property that is fully taxable, the 60T portion. And that ultimately comes to 86,386 square feet on page 6. The first premise entry on page 5 is 12,981 square feet in the basement.
That is correct.
Have you seen photos of the basement?
Yes, I've seen older pictures of the basement, and it was currently, unused substandard basement. Absolutely.
When you say you've seen older photos, how old do you think they are?
I can't remember the exact date, but I included them in my last brief, and they were from an inspection, probably with you, if you could say the date.
In fact, I'm the one who took the photos, but I'll come to that. And it was subsequent to Canad acquiring the property. Do you know whether there is access to the basement?
I am not aware of the exact access to the basement.
Every lease in this building is gross, is that correct, or semi-gross?
From my understanding, yes.
The capitalization rate proposed for 2020 was 7.85%, correct?
You know what? I'm going off memory, Mark. I don't know.
Okay. Do you think the building has improved since April 1 of 18 to April 1 of 2021?
I am not sure if any work has been done.
Are you aware that the owner is actively marketing the building for lease?
Last I looked, yes, there is space for lease.
And are you aware that it's done through Colliers?
That's what the flyer was for.
Those are my questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Knight. Do you have any questions?
I do not.
Mr. Hutchings, do you have any questions?
No, I'm good, thank you.
Thank you. And I don't have any questions either, so Mr. Newman, you go ahead.
Page 2 of my submission.
You got the, give me a second. Okay.
So the building is at the corner of Portage and Donald's. And again, I told you at the outset of the afternoon, we'd see a spectrum of cap rates. So here's an OFC with an effective age of 1930 that gets a capitalization rate of 7.35%. It's had vacancy of over 20% for years, and I'll show you that in more detail. And because it's an OFC, it gets a 12% vacancy. If it were an OFD, for example, it would get a 15% vacancy. So the rent is approximately $11.15 per square foot as used by the assessor. Let's deal with the square footage first. As I addressed with the assessor, and again, I don't want to bounce you around in the presentation, so I'm going to speak to you first and then I'll show you the attachments. So on square footage, as we've addressed, there's 12,981 square feet, excuse me, 81 square feet in the basement. I'll show you in a few moments why that's not leasable. And I'll show you an email from the assessor detailing the calculation. Our view is that you've got 106,703 square feet of leasable area. That's what has been reported to the assessor for a number of years. I'll come back to that. So the 2020 questionnaire, it's in the assessor's brief, it's in my brief. And as you just saw me do, the net operating income adding back depreciation and mortgage interest becomes $729,182. I'll show you 2019 questionnaire, and you'll see that the net operating income is $584,000 after adding back depreciation and mortgage interest. And I'll show you the 2018 questionnaire, where it becomes $717,000. My view is simply that the gross potential income is overstated. It cannot generate $11.15 per square foot. I'm going to show you the marketing brochure from Colliers in a couple of moments that offers the space at $9.50 per square foot. Ultimately, I have used a rate of $10 per square foot. The vacancy, as I've just told you, 12% is standard for an OFC. There's the vacancy in 18, 19, and 20, 20.05, 22%, 23.8%. I'm going to set it at a conservative 15%, but I do so on the basis that there needs to be a higher capitalization rate. 2020 assessment, as proposed by the assessor, the capitalization rate was 7.85%. What do we think has happened to this building to make it better? Absolutely nothing, I'll suggest. No investor would I would suggest accept a 7.35% capitalization rate as being appropriate for a building with in excess of 20% vacancy and with a net operating income, which the assessor says for the portions, the two sections of the building should total $996,000. That's much of the difference in this case. The assessor's net operating income is $996,000. The taxable and the exempt portions combined, found on page 9 of his brief. I'm telling you and showing you that this building has never done better than $729,000. I can tell you about remote work. I can tell you about COVID. I can tell you about all that. None of that is going to change the condition of this building. All of that makes it more difficult to get people into downtown Winnipeg. I'm going to suggest to you to lease space. It especially makes it more difficult to get people to lease space in this poor building relative to the market. So let me show you now the attachments. Page 19. What I've done here is I valued the two income streams. The fully taxable at $5,873,000. The school tax exempt at $2,669,000. The combined value is $8,542,000. The rental rate used is $10. The vacancy is 15%. The shortfall is $10. The non-recoverables, remembering that every lease in this place is a gross lease or semi-gross lease, is 7%, and then the capitalization rate is 8%. Page 20 is my communication with the assessor this spring in dealing with the granting of the exemption for the school tax exempt portion. The only reason I'm showing it to you is so that we can calculate the 73,361 square feet I've used in my fully taxable calculation. Page 22. This is a listing brochure from Colliers offering the space at $9.50 net. If you look at page 25, you can see they are estimating the additional rent at $13.86 a square foot. The assessor's shortfall allowance is $10, but that's what the Colliers was marketing it at. Page 28, photos. I took these photos. I took these photos in, I believe it was the spring of 2019. I went to the property. The photo on page 28 is the basement area. To the left, you can see the elevator, not the immediate left by the edge, but just to the right of that, you can see the elevator door. There's a single elevator that comes down to the basement, leaving aside a freight elevator, which I'll show you in a moment. Page 29 is one of the wall areas in the basement. Page 30 is what was a long time ago some basement space that was leased. The reason it was leased is because there was a stairway coming down from the main floor. That stairway has been enclosed. You see the drywall on the right edge of the photo. That closes it in. And then page 31, you see the freight elevator that comes to the basement. And page 32, you see the stairway that comes up from the basement, takes you to the back lane, which runs parallel to Portage on the south side between the Met and this building. So it's behind the building. I'm suggesting to you the basement is not leasable. Page 33 is the questionnaire for 2020. We've looked at this a little bit already, but I want to point out a couple of things. Firstly, the area shown as leasable, 106,987, the vacancy of 23.8%. And then we've got detailed financial statements. And if you get to page 36, you'll see the same $47,619 we looked at in the assessor's brief. And then above that, you see the mortgage interest of $276 and the depreciation of $405, and you add those all together and you get over $729,000 as I addressed with the assessor. That's the best rent net operating income this building has achieved since Canad has owned it, and indeed as the assessor conceded since before that as well. Starting at page 40, you've actually got a rent roll. If you go to 44, and this is what I want to show you, you see the leasable area of 106,987 square feet. You also see the large number of vacant spaces in this building. Then page 46 is the questionnaire for 2019. Again, 106,887 square feet, 22% vacancy. Again, you've got a financial statement. And if you go to page 49, you'll see the net operating income is a negative $83,000. But if you add back the depreciation and the mortgage interest, you get to $584,000. Then, continuing ahead, starting at page 53, you get the rent roll again. And then if you go to page 61, this is the questionnaire that was submitted in the spring of 2018, showing 106,358 square feet of leasable area, showing the vacancy of 20.05%. And if you go starting at page 73, and this was the first year of ownership by the present owner, so it's April through December of 18 only. So one has to be careful with this, but as I asked of the assessor's got access to the full history on the property, and the property has never had net operating income greater than the $729,000 we looked at. So what are the issues here? And again, buildings that are either fully gross or semi-gross, especially big ones, can be very complicated to do in terms of backing out base years. And the simplest way to address it is to look to the net operating income. So we see $729,000 in 2020, the best year ever. This is a tough building. 7.35% is too low. Is an investor at April 1 of 2021 going to buy a building with over 20% vacancy at 7.35%? I suggest respectfully not. So ultimately what we've given you is a value of, and I'm going back to page 19, $8,542,000, split, as you can see, between the 60T and the 40S classifications, and that is my submission.
Thank you. Any questions, Mr. Patrick?
I have no questions. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Mr. Hutchings, any questions?
Yes, I'll make this quick. Mr. Newman, any idea of the cap rate on that sale that occurred in 2018?
Well, the problem is, I don't know what the net operating income was. I know what the net operating income became later, but I don't know what it was at the date of purchase.
Okay. And okay, so I guess we'll leave it at that. My second question is, with the understanding that there's probably motivation in the purchase price, your estimated market value is about $3 million below that purchase price. Are you saying that there's $3 million in motivation in that sale?
That's one way of looking at it. I didn't phrase it that way, but certainly that's one way of looking at it.
Okay.
I mean, what's happened is the vacancy has increased over the years, unfortunately.
Okay. Okay, thanks, Mr. Newman. That's all my questions.
Any questions, Diane?
I do not.
So, Mr. Newman, based on your photographs, I assume it answers the question. The question is, are they deriving any rent at all in the basement for storage or anything else?
They're deriving absolutely nothing from the basement.
So used for storage anything else other than the vacant walls that your photographs depict?
They're exact.
Okay, thank you. That's my questions. So we'll now proceed to the final matter, which is 232 Main Street.
Okay, with regards to this one, I think it's going to be easier. I'm just going to quickly make a rec into a PDF and send it over. It should take me no more than a couple minutes.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear that.
I'm just going to quickly turn my rec into a PDF that I could send over. Just it's going to be easier to read it than me explaining it all.
That's fine. We'll wait for the PDF to run.
Okay, I'll just send it over right away.
Mm-hmm.
All right, Jasminder, you should get it shortly in your email.
I just put that that file in the folder, Mr. Chair.
Okay.
The file.
I see it. Yeah. Okay, I've got it. Does everybody have it?
Maybe not yet. Ms. Knight and Mr. Hatching, I just put that file in the share folder.
Yeah, I'm just finding it. Yeah, just give me a second.
This new one, I'm gonna print it for you.
I've got it.
Oh, you got it? Oh,
Yes. Thank you.
Where is it gonna be in the shared folder?
Must be at the very top.
No, it's not at the top. No,
No, I got mine. I'll tell you what mine is.
it's at the very bottom.
Yeah, it's
It says item 8 about a minute ago.
it's the second, it's in the middle of the 232 Main Street. Okay, it says A and T rec at the end. So it's right after his initial brief.
Now I've got it. Thank you.
Okay, we all have it now, so you can proceed when you're ready, Mr. Paycheck.
All right, thank you, everyone. Let me get the right thing. Okay, so we are looking at 232 Main Street. This is now the Fortune and McDonald building. We have a 2023 roll number of 3,728,000, which what I'm going to do first is just explain the building, and then I will go to my rec once I go over the income approach. So I am, well, I'll just say it quickly, but I am recommending to reduce the value to 2,949,000.
Okay. Maybe I'll just ask Mr. Newman if he's going to accept that recommendation.
It's a good start, but it's not quite there.
Okay, go ahead, Mr. Stinchen.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So we have a again, a building that, if you look at my page 2 pictures, you can see this was originally 2 buildings. That was a renovations done, completed, re-put together. You can see the matching exterior on an older building. The way this one's built, it is 4 retail units on the main floor, and then converted, renovated office inside. And I've included some pictures later on or down the pages to show. But you can see after renovations, we have a total leasable area of 20,334 and a gross floor area of 29,559. The original buildings were built in 1883 and 1884, and then them being converted and renovated, it now has an effective year of 2010. You turn to page 3, you can see exterior picture on the top after the renovation, and you can also see how the interior is being renovated. Page 4 as well, some of the inside hallway and stairways. So the way this property is valued is with 2 income streams. We have if you turn to my recommendation now, you'll get a better idea here. But we have on the left of my recommendation, on the left-hand side, is the original value. So if you turn to the right-hand side, that is what I'm defending. I'm looking at the OFD income stream, which is the 2nd, 3rd, and 4th floor. This is a leasable area of 13,173. I've reduced the rent from $14.65 to $13, and I've left the vacancy rate at 15%. You'll see the shortfall rate is still $8. The expenses is still 3%, and I've increased the cap rate from 6.65% to 7.25%. So what I'm trying to do here is keep that market vacancy of 15% for the OFD market, but I'm also trying to help represent that this building is going to take time to fill. So there is a higher vacancy as it's been completely renovated, and as it fills up, I believe it'll be a more valuable building. But for now, for our hearing today, I am keeping that 15% vacancy, but increasing the cap rate to try to represent some of those issues of filling it up after a complete renovation. So you'll see that I'm using a 7.25% cap across the OFD stream, and then to the right of the OFD stream, the next column is the retail stream. So this represents the 4 retail units on the main floor. We have a leasable area of 7,161, and I've reduced the rental rate from $16.97 to $14. I've maintained that 6% vacancy rate for retail, shortfall rate of $7, the rate of 3% still for expenses, and then again using that higher cap rate of 7.25 to better represent that fill-up time for those retail units. And I'm getting a total value of $2,949,000. And you'll see on my brief, if you turn to my page 8, what I've done is included a wide range of OFD rates downtown. So these are, again, older downtown office building, usually numerous stories. You can see, so I've lowered our rental rates in this building to better represent the market for OFDs downtown. Again, we have a wide range of buildings that, some on Lombard, some on Bannatyne, some on Mcdermott. We're trying to look at some of the nicer OFDs to represent a fully renovated OFD. So this is an older building that's been completely renovated, and there are some nice OFDs downtown. And you can see with the rental range of on the low end $9 all the way up to $16.72, we get an average of $13.46 across the OFDs. And I've also included underneath just some retail properties. Again, hard to find those storefront retails downtown, but I did want to include something. These are all, you have one at 33 Hargrave at the bottom, which is comparable number 7, and that's at 500 square feet at $20.55. And 266 Portage, older, 1901 with an effective age of 1911, and this is 1,800 square feet at $20.53. But the range is from 20 to 27. But I did, because a lot of these are outside of downtown, and a lot of the retail, just like some suburban offices outside of downtown, I am trying to represent that issue here, and along with that and the vacancy, upping that cap rate a bit and lowering the rent as well. I've lowered the rent to help represent this location. And if you can see page 12, it's starting to get some tenants in it. It's actually getting some rent. You can see from its mailer on page 12 going forward. Page 13, some expenses. And then page 1, if you turn to, my page 15 is page 1 of the rental rate of the rental list. You'll see, we do have some of the places getting leases in place before the reference date. So unit 203 is one of the offices, Quinton's Limited, that leased out for $15 a square foot. You can see underneath 5 Q's Limited at unit 203 as well. You can see unit 205 in the building is leasing out, or no, that's not in that lease. There are a few. And then for the retail side, unit 224, which is a main floor unit, 1.5 Ventures is leasing out for $18 a square foot with a step up in 22 to $19 a square foot. And then main floor unit, which is a retail unit 234, is the time change bar. It's starting at $5 a square foot. And then it's stepping up over the years, a couple dollars a square foot every year. So those are the currently, and if we turn to page 17, there's another lease, unit 303 to 307, which is a Lawco. It's got a lease signed in 2019 for $14 a square foot. And then unit 308 is leasing for $15 a square foot. So again, trying to represent some of these issues as it's filling up, And when if it does hit that fully leased, around hitting some of those $15 rentals, and see what those main units are at the places that have filled it up, but we don't have the leases yet, and we can go from there. So I do think this value is fair, and if you have any questions, please let me know. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Newman, any questions?
Yes. So you've gone through the rent roll, and which is found at pages 15 through 17 of your brief. And as you fairly noted, there's lots of space vacant still. The building first began occupancy in 2019, correct?
That's when the earliest leases look, yes.
Yeah. And so at least 2 full years later, in April of 21, I calculate the retail vacancy at 38%. Is that consistent with what you calculate?
Yeah, I just only have till the end of 2020. I'm not sure on any of the 21 fills until the reference date. So I'll just take your word for it.
And I calculate the office vacancy up to 2020 at 45.92%. Is that consistent with what you calculate?
Yeah, it doesn't. Again, I didn't do the newest up to the reference for 2021, but I believe you.
So looking at your recommendation, the vacancy allowances you've given are the standard model vacancy allowances for the type of property, or for the class of property, correct?
Yes.
And then what you've done is you've reduced the rent somewhat, and you've increased the capitalization rate somewhat, and that's really what's driving your recommendation ultimately. So rental rate has come down a bit, capitalization rate has come up a bit, but vacancy and non-recoverable stay the same, correct?
Correct.
And just coming back into your brief for a moment, looking at page 8, the top portion of the page is OFD comparables, correct?
Yes, sir.
And many of them are at 167 Lombard, correct?
Yes.
And I think there's about 10 of them at 167 Lombard. 167 Lombard is the Grain Exchange building, correct?
Correct.
And the Grain Exchange building is hooked into the walkway system, correct?
Yes, yeah, you can go underground to Richardson, yeah.
Exactly. And then in terms of your retail comps, you have a number of restaurants, you have some retail. Just one that my attention is drawn to, 266 Portage. So that's a building on the south side of Portage between Fort and Gary, correct?
Correct, Mark.
And you're showing the rent there as being $20.53 a square foot. If I told you I'm holding in my hand the questionnaire response for that property for 2020, and that the rent shown was $8.20 a square foot for that 1,800 square feet. Did you look at the actual questionnaire on that property?
Well, I always try to, and I'm assuming I did when doing these, but if you just want to cross it out and ignore it, that's fine. I'm fine with that. I reduced the retail rent to $14.
Yes. Those are my questions.
Thank you. Ms. Legg, any questions?
I do not.
Mr. Hutchings, do you have any questions?
Yes, one quick one, thank you. Mr. Jonathan, any details on, it looks like there's been extensive renovations done to this building with the emphasis on keeping the character, I guess. Any permit values available to you for renovations?
Yeah, the ones I looked up were approximately, so it did have permit value approximately 4.5 million. So the owner stated that they spent slightly more than 4.5 for all the renovations, and this was 4 retail stores with separate entrances will remain. Interior demolition to 3 floors and basement of existing historical building. Removed most interior partition walls and upgraded all electrical mechanical to conform to code. All new doors, windows, floors, millwork, partition walls, and also foundation shoring. Exterior alterations include stairwell to replace old fire escape. So that was what was done.
And this building, it does have its historical designation?
Yes.
Okay. And was there a sale on this building at all?
Originally, I'd have to look up the exact date, but 2016, the Fortune building sold for $470,000, and in 2016 as well, the other building beside it sold for $850,000.
Okay. All right. That's all my questions. Thank you.
Thank you. I don't have any further questions, so Mr. Newman?
So, heritage status, yes. And of course, when it has heritage status, many elements of the building, both exterior and interior, must be preserved. I will show you in my attachments exactly what is designated in these buildings. But of course, when you have to preserve all of that, it gets complicated and it becomes more difficult. And frankly, the individual who bought this property, this is a labor of love for him. And he's a good citizen because he wants to preserve a building like this. Will he make money on it? Maybe one day, but not for a very, very long time. And again, that's really the issue. If we went to sell it in the market at April 1 of 21, what's it worth? So obviously the differences in our rent have become much narrower by virtue of the recommendation than they were initially. I showed you on page 4 rents for retail space in downtown Winnipeg. And you can see that I've got 262 Portage for a couple of spaces. That's the same building as 266 Portage. That's why I know it so well. 413 Graham, 422 Portage. Let's remember something about this building. It's a bit of an island. The corner of Main Street and St. Mary's. It's not like being on Carlton, for example, across from the convention center. It's not like being at Portage in Maine, where you've got lots of development, lots of office density. It's a bit of an island out on this part of Main Street with not a lot around it. So, as I say, the rents have narrowed, but I'll show you what rent I've used ultimately compared to the assessor. But there was some space occupied for retail purposes. There was 2,938 square feet at 234 Main at a rent of $5, stepping up $7, $9, and $11. And I used $8 a square foot for that space. I valued the vacant space at $13 a square foot. The assessor, through his recommendation, is now valuing at $14 a square foot. So there's a bit of a difference still between us there. On the office side, the assessor was at $14.64 a square foot. I'm going to show you some Class D office buildings right across the street, in fact, and also 262 Portage, which is 266 Portage, same one in which comps have been gathered. I'm going to show you them for a couple of reasons. 243 Main, for those of us who are old enough to remember, used to be Century Motors, and a long time ago, it was acquired and converted to what is now an office building. And so what I've done is I've used the actual rents in place for the space that is occupied, and I've used $12 a square foot for the vacant space, and the assessor is at $13 And so again, we have a slight vacancy there still. The vacancy on the retail is 6%, which is what the assessor used. That's the standard vacancy for that type of property. Actual vacancy at April 1 of 21 is 38%. I indicated conditionally on the capitalization rate increasing, I would leave the vacancy at 6%. Office, again, 15%, which is the standard vacancy for Class D. Conditionally, I said, okay, I'll leave it there, but the cap rate's got to come up. Actual vacancy at April 1 of 21 is 45.92%. Again, from an office perspective, from a retail perspective, you got all the COVID implications in terms of trying to open new businesses in this time frame. The original cap rate set on this property were 6.85% for the retail and 6.65% for the office, something I don't understand, frankly, but that's what they were, and the assessor's now making some adjustments to that. Let me jump you ahead. To page 21, which is my spreadsheet. So you can see two sides to it. There is the office side, which is the left-hand side. I've used actual rents in place, so Quinton's is in at 15. There's another space at Unit 205 at $15. There's another space, 206, 207, a company called Freed Home at $11. And then $14 for Mark's Law and $12 for John Swiston. So I've used $12 for the vacant space and used the actual rents in place. My gross potential income is $161,000. The assessor's gross income is $171,000. So we're $10,000 apart. I left the 15% vacancy. I can see here I messed up the non-recoverable and I put it at 2% for some reason. And then I put the cap rate at 8%, and that drives a value of $1,487,000 on the office building, and the assessor is at $1,729,000. And then on the retail portion, again, I used $8 a square foot for John Schools, and that's the rent that steps up, $57911. I used $8, and for 0.5 Ventures, I used the 18. I used 13 for the rest. My gross potential income, $85,000. The assessor, $100,000. I kept the 6%. I got the 7% non-recoverable. And then my net operating income is $72,000. The assessor's is $88,000. I applied an 8% cap, and my total value becomes $2,388,000 compared to the assessor's recommendation of $2,949,000. Let me just show you some other things. The financial statement for the December year end is pages 22 through 24. They lost $113,000 on the property. Page 25, 26, 27 is the rent roll. You've seen the same thing in the assessor's brief. Again, lots of the word vacant appears far too frequently. Page 30 is the list of historic resources, and it's the historic designation. You can see there's two properties at the top, 226 Main, the McDonald block, and 232 Main, which is the Fortune block. And, you've got exterior elements, but you've got interior elements as well in both buildings that have to be preserved and maintained as part of the heritage designation. And as I've said to you in a previous property, whenever you've got a heritage designation, it makes the property a little bit more complicated and a little more restrictive in terms of use. You've then got some site plans on 32 and 33. You've got a variety of photos on 34 and 35. One of the things that happens with a property like this is because you have to preserve, you get a lot of inefficiencies in terms of hallways and corridors and common areas. It all looks very nice, but it's not efficient. Page 36 That's 262 Portage. That's the assessment as proposed for 2023 with an 8.1% cap rate. 243 Main, that's a building across the street, which I've also told you is an OFD building. This was the 2020 rent roll comps at 11.31 average, $11 on the median. Page 38 is the actual assessment for 785 and for 243 Main with a 7.85 cap, and you can see the rental rates of 11.41, 11.64, and 10.77 depending on the space. I told you earlier that you would see in something I was going to give you something about the classifications of buildings, and perhaps this should have been in many of the briefs. So here's something from BOMA at page 39 that talks about the different types of buildings: a Class A, a Class B, a Class C, and that's at 39 and 40. And then at 41, you've got some more definitions to distinguish A, B, and C. In their world, the lowest classification is a C. They don't go to a D. But they do note that Class C buildings have the lowest rental rates, take the longest time to lease, and are often targeted as development opportunities. So page 42, we talked about 1661 Portage Avenue earlier. It's part of the assessor's rental study. Here is a Collier's brochure, and the only reason I put this here, this is a suburban, I would call it a suburban A building. The assessor called it an OFB, but the reason I call it that type of building, it's got multiple elevators, it's got a lobby, it's got security desk in the lobby. You can see the photos on page 45. So it is a good building from that perspective. And there you see it located essentially at Route 90 on Portage. Then page 47, and I have found this interesting because this is the building that is at Wellington 90 heading south. To the right of it, in the photo, at the right edge of the photo, is what used to be the Radisson Hotel by the airport. But this was a development all done at the same time: office building, hotel, and some bridging space in between. The reason I bring this forward is because this is an example of a suburban B building. It's interesting that the assessor puts it into the C category sometimes. And this was really here just to help distinguish the different categories of buildings. So where does it take us to at the end of the day? Again, the recommendation brings us a lot closer than we were. I continue to believe that the capitalization rate is too low. The vacancy used for the OFD is 15%. Actual is 45%. For the retail is 6%. Actual is 38%. I've given you 262 Portage. I've given you 243 Main, nearby buildings, both OFDs at 7.85% on 243 Main, a building with very substantial occupancy, very minor vacancy. And this building, it's in its infancy, it's risky, it needs a higher capitalization rate. And so in the end, I used 8%. And at the end of the day, that's the difference between the assessor and I. That is my submission.
Thank you. Mr. Spacek, any questions?
I have no questions. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Bobby, you got any questions?
My only question is, Mr. Newman, on page 21 of your workup on the office side, there's some income from other income, and it says parking. Is that actually parking income?
No, well, there's no income shown there because there is no on-site parking.
Right.
That's my template.
Okay, I see. Thank you. My only question.
Thank you. Dan, do you have any questions?
I do not. Thank you.
And I don't, so thank you very much. We've now, we're going to adjourn the hearing. We've heard all matters on the docket. And we'll render a decision as soon as we can.
All right. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Mr.
Thank you.
Chairman. Thank you, Mr. Newman.